public comments on non-agenda items are, yes.
Karen Bennett, 28 Main Street. Could you tell me the date that you all voted for the special town meeting? I've watched the 6-6 meeting several times, and I don't see where there was a vote, and there's also no minutes from that meeting. So I can't confirm. I heard Greg said that the date was, but there was no vote.
So the official vote was when they approved the warrant on the 13th.
So the select board doesn't have to vote on it, just so I understand.
Select board has to vote on the warrant.
But not on the date,
And the warrant includes the date.
The warrant includes the date.
okay?
But they approved the date on the 6th as a
Tuesday.
tentative date.
As a tentative date, we may not have voted on it.
Correct. Correct.
Are there any other comments from issues not on the agenda? The next item is the chairman's report, of which there is none. And we are supposed to go over the select board action items, which are all for future dates. Is there anything else that should be on the selectmen's action items?
I thought there were a few on today's.
Today, yes, I'm sorry, yes. The shuttle service for beach bums, sorry. The senior center, School Street sidewalks, harbor management, compensation study, police chief contract, water resource protection update, and the flagpole discussion.
So maybe those things that are not being discussed tonight, Greg could just.
Yeah.
Greg, is it the next meeting that those items can be discussed, or?
Many of those are in fact being discussed. I looked at it and said, it can't be June 20th already.
I
And lo and behold,
think it was like the senior center, the harbor master,
Yeah.
harbor management plan, compensation study. Those are the ones that are not on tonight's
The agenda.
agenda. Can we discuss them at the next meeting, or?
it looks like, yeah, so that would be on the
July 6th.
July 6th.
okay.
In that case, shall we move on to the public forum for the town warrant? You can find me, Greg, and I can share my screen.
You do it, or you want to do it?
Why don't you do it?
Hold on just a second. Okay.
once again, we're going over the 7 articles for the town meeting warrant for the town meeting on June 28th, which is a Wednesday, which is unusual. This is a question and answer session. There is no time, the warrant has already been approved, so we can't change the articles directly. When the motions are made, it will be possible for people to move to amend the motions. And the polite way to do that is to give your amendment to Alan Wilson ahead of time in writing. If you think of something at the last moment, write it down and pass it forward to Alan. Trying to deal with amendments on the floor verbally is just very hard, makes it very hard to run the meeting. The first article is the district school budget. The reason that we're having this meeting is that the Proposition 2.5 override vote failed in Essex, and the school committee got together and put together a compromise budget that preserves program and does not lay off teachers. However, it does reduce the number of teachers by an additional 2.95 full-time equivalents, and reduces the number of teaching assistants. So the program is intact but thinner than it was intended. The agreement reduces Manchester's share of the district apportionment by $491,610. And we are going to ask the Finance Committee and the Select Board, ask that the voters at the town meeting approve the budget. Are there any questions? Okay. Article 2 is more complicated and not getting any simpler as we get closer. Both turf fields are older than, have been in use for longer than their anticipated life. They're used hard and they need to be replaced. The school district is paying for the replacement out of their expendable reserves, with the intention that somehow the reserves will be replenished, and the plan had been that the school would undertake debt. There's a reluctance on both sides to pay the fees and interest on debt, and a reluctance also to agree to an indebtedness now in an amount when we don't know what the final amount is actually going to be. So just go on to the next slide if you would briefly, and this is part of the reason it's complicated. There are 2 fields, the Highland Field at the high school, which will be paid for primarily by 2/3 by Manchester, approximately 2/3 by Manchester, 1/3 by Essex, in the reimbursement. The second field is the Brook Street Field, also known as the Coach Ed Field. Seriously, the man's name was Ed Field. They're not putting money into Ed anymore. He's dead. Great teacher, but yes. So half of that is paid by Manchester's Parks and Rec, and we have already, Manchester's has already agreed to pay that, which is approximately $400,000. 2/3 of the remaining half would fall to Manchester, and 1/3 or 1/6 of the total would fall to Essex. and add to that the complexity of does the school take on debt? Does the school ask the towns to make a capital investment at their next town meetings, which are likely to be in November? Or, I don't know what the or is, but there are apparently more alternatives. So that's why what we're asking to be approved at the town meeting is to take $400,000 of the money that Manchester saves by going to the compromise budget and dedicate it to paying for the fields. And that would leave a very small piece of what Manchester owes to be part of the school debt, or Manchester could pay it from reserves, or we could decide to borrow it ourselves. But none of that is what we're talking about tonight or at the town meeting. What we're talking about at the town meeting is saying that $400,000 of what Manchester saves in the compromise budget will be used to pay for the field repairs. And that reduces borrowing costs if there is borrowing. So that, could you go back one slide?
So the question in chat is this in addition to what already was voted on? And the answer is yes.
Yes,
It is an addition.
in this slide, in the purple, the darkest purple is the $400,000 that we've already contributed. It is because the field at Brook Street, behind the Memorial School, is used about half-time by Manchester Parks and Rec. And the regional agreement states that the town and the school will split the cost of maintenance of that field. So that $400,000 already approved for the previous town meeting.
And if I may?
Yeah.
When people wish to speak or ask questions, we ask for name and address, and I
Yes.
think in chat we should do the same.
Okay.
You can turn off the chat and people can raise their hands.
Or, Muffin?
That's not Muffin.
Muffin has
Muffin
raised
is
their hand.
there. Her
Muffin
hand is
is
Right,
raised.
but the
But-
person
okay.
who spoke from
The chat.
I-827-705, whomever was in the chat,
Okay, thank you. Can you add your name and address in the chat?
Yes, it looks like it was Sandy. Sandy, I'm going to assume it was Sandy Rogers, SR.
Muffin?
Yes, I am Muffin Driscoll, 33 Bridge Street. And what is the total cost for place to?
That was kind of broken up. You asked for the total cost.
The total cost for place to Brook Street surface?
Each field is about $800,000. So Manchester has already appropriated $400 for the Parks and Rec use.
Right, so if we were to appropriate now the monies as a result of the lower, like the compromise budget, wouldn't we be funding almost the entire 800,000?
We're also funding part of Highland with that money.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. The next. Oh, okay. Article 3 is a zoning article. It proposes to replace section 12, which is administration and procedures, with an entirely new section. And those of you who are watching can read it more easily than I can, the various things that it does. And are there questions on Article 3? There'll be, Chris, will there be handouts at the town meeting?
Yes, there will be handouts. And the warrant itself as well. And there are various descriptions of the administrative changes in section 12 on the website, including a side-by-side comparison of the two line by line pretty much. So residents can go to the town website, to the planning board website, and get as much information as they want out of those comparisons.
Alan has his hand up.
Alan? Yes.
Thank you, Anne. I just want to mention for Chris's benefit, I emailed this to Ron and Sarah earlier today, but the motions will need to include all the language that is included in the proposed amendments, and those will need to be in the form of a handout at the meeting.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome.
Next slide. Okay. If Article 3 does not pass, there is an Article 4 that the town meeting will consider. We'll pass over it if Article 3 succeeds. It reintroduces the criteria for site plan review, which was inadvertently dropped during the last fall town meeting. And it uses legacy language. Chris, do you have anything?
Well, I would just say that it's not inadvertent that it was that it was taken out. It was taken out on purpose because we're replacing it with better language.
Mhm.
The inadvertent part was not getting to section 12 at the last town meeting.
Sorry,
So the result was that we don't have a site plan review section in the zoning bylaw, and this article would simply replace what was taken out.
and there's newer, better language in
Yes,
Article 3.
The new section 12 does a better job of explaining site plan review. It provides better criteria for the planning board to use or any other special permit granting authority to review the project.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, Article 5. Article 5 is also zoning, and it covers what they interestingly refer to as Scrivener's errors, which is 19th century concept, when people were copying and didn't always copy correctly. The reworking of the zoning bylaws has been extensive, and things have been renumbered, and there were oversights in this article proposes to correct them. Yes?
Yeah, there are no changes to any policy or anything. It's just fixing some, mostly references to other sections. So if one section refers to another section, we want to make sure that we provide the right numbers to the new section that it's referring to. So it's pretty simple. I think the existing bylaws got a bunch of existing bad references as well. So this is not magical. It's just what happens.
Are there any questions or comments on Article 5? Okay, Article 6. Ladder. We have a ladder truck that will have pass inspection in Massachusetts. It's a large expenditure for an unusual special town meeting, but there's a 2-year lead time. We have the funds in hand in the fire equipment reserves that we've been building up over many years. And at this select board meeting, we will approve the sale of one of our other trucks, and that will provide the funds beyond what's available in the fire equipment reserves. The current truck should be very marketable outside of Massachusetts. And to deal with the 2-year lead time for a brand new ladder truck, our incoming fire chief will look for a demonstration model or a used truck that is in suitable condition. Okay, I have a comment there that is on the way.
Maybe Manchester by the Sea will need to pay. Is that the comment?
Yep.
Says Manchester by the Sea will need to pay. Did you write this?
This is what I wrote back to
Okay.
Sandy.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
So, no effect on the tax rate. We've been planning for replacement of the truck for some time. And I see no hands, no questions. So let's try Article 7. The salary, we're creating a salary reserve account to deal with primarily with union contracts that have settled, so that people can get their pay increase on July 1st, as at the start of the new fiscal year. It's $50,000, the total of $50,000, which covers the settled contracts and some overtime for the fire department, because 2 of our new hires will not be out of school for their certification until the middle of July. Anybody? Okay, that's, the next slide, for anyone who uses these slides sees these slides online, is a series of links to more information.
Nice slides. Very helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Will they be shared at the town meeting itself, or any reason why we can't?
We could put these up as part of the voting. As part of each
Might be
article.
helpful, because I think we got some, 20 people last time, but they're very helpful, and it would be nice if everybody who votes can.
Something that we need to take up with Alan.
The suggestion is to have these slides visible, this slide visible at the town meeting?
Not the questions and links, because I don't think that's the time to be chasing links.
Right.
But as a way of introducing each article, the slides for the article.
I think we can do that. I think we should also have people who are speaking to them, however.
We can chop them up, and as we decide who is going to be introducing each article, they can have one of these, if that pleases you, Alan.
Quick question, Alan. So what appears behind you at the introduction of each article? Is it the actual amendment copy, or is it at our pleasure, or your pleasure?
Well, in some cases, they're much too long to display.
Yes, they are long, yeah.
The zoning articles can't be displayed effectively, because if you put them up, the type would be too small for people to read. So what is generally shown is the motion, but in the case of the zoning articles, we'll need to abbreviate that.
Okay.
I personally think these slides would be much more helpful than the motion. I just, Alan, you know, in other town meetings that I've been to, there has been a similar setup where, to your point, you have somebody talk to a slide which summarizes the article, and it's been very well received, and I think helps people understand, which is the goal.
Well, of course, but the motion is what people are voting on.
Mhm.
True, and
So we could introduce perhaps with an English language slide, and then during the discussion and voting, put up the actual motion
yes.
or such, so whatever the planning board would put up for the motions that are very long.
Oh, that makes sense.
Sandy Rogers has another comment, Ann.
Yes,
Says the total math needs to be shown on the fields, both what was approved last town meeting and this request, and how each is being paid, by reserves, by tax, by override, and then split between Essex and Manchester by the Sea.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand if I can be recognized. I just think the way that it was shown here without the numbers in two different pie charts based on the field, I think it was a bit confusing, and I think everyone, like, I wasn't sure if we were re-voting because of the way that Essex voted, how much we're incurring with, you know, loans. It was pretty confusing. So I think if there's a visual way to break it down, I think it will help everyone immensely.
So when I had suggested the pie charts,
Yep.
my thought was that each slice would be annotated with what Sandy is basically suggesting. You know, this has already been approved, with the
Right.
dollar amount, and just explaining what each slice is a little bit, so.
Yeah, I think that will help a lot, and then like be very clear about what the ask is, where that money's coming from. And I thought we had voted in, I have to go back, I don't have it in front of me, I thought we voted in a larger amount to start with than just the 400, so just following everything will be very helpful.
oh,
So,
okay. Rather than having a side conversation, I believe we authorized the school to incur debt. And we did that both at the town meeting, in the annual town meeting, and at the ballot. That was
Right.
for the school to borrow up to $1.6 million, to do the whole project. That amount was reduced because at the same town meeting, Manchester voted to appropriate $400,000 toward its share of the Brook Street. So that reduced the probable borrowing to a maximum of 1.2 million.
That came from fund balance.
And yes, the 400 came from fund balance, or as they say, Manchester reserves. The question now is, how is that 1.2 actually going to be funded? And it's possible that we will go ahead and the school will borrow it. It is also possible it is necessary that the school pay for it as ongoing, and their source for that money is their school, they have some school choice reserves that they have left over from 10 years ago, before they started putting the school choice reserves into each year's budget. So that's a fund that's cannot be replenished, will not be replenished, because that money now goes into the operating budget. So the school will pay, because the work is going on this summer, and neither town has, the two towns have not put on the warrants, monies to pay, so that the capital cost can be transferred to the towns. There are several ways of doing that, and it's not clear at the moment which one is, but yes, we can put in the numbers approximately. The 1/3, 2/3 is only an approximation. We don't know exactly what the total is, so putting in hard numbers, but we can certainly put in approximate numbers.
Yeah, I guess, because this sort of sounds like an and on top of everything that was approved. So if we're borrowing and we're approved what could be borrowed, once that we've approved it, do we still have to approve it, whatever we borrowed to be allocated to the actual spending, and that's what we're doing? Or is this going back to the coffers and saying, well, we need the 400 more than what we thought? So that's what I'm really confused about, and there are probably others that will be as well.
So the total doesn't change.
The total doesn't change. What we're doing is taking some savings and saying, okay, rather than either the school, then the district borrowing 1.2, Manchester will put in 400,000 at the beginning, bringing that down to 800. And if Essex also decides that they want to put in something, then that may reduce the borrowing to 400. But the reason for putting this on the warrant now is that it means that most of the savings that we get from going to the compromised budget will be allocated specifically for the field and will not roll over into Manchester's fund budget, fund.
Yeah.
I hope that's a little clearer, and I understand that it's not at all clear. And we've got a week.
Pie chart would help.
Yeah, the
I
two
think
pie
that-
charts with some labels, I
yeah.
think that's probably
Yeah.
enough detail.
I think,
Label what you have, I think
Yeah.
that's all
Okay.
that's being asked, yeah.
by tax and all the different, Alan has his hand up.
Yes, Alan.
Thank you, Ann. If I could just go back to the slides for a minute. I know Tiffany is working on the slide deck for the electronic voting system this week. So Greg, if you could send her the substantive slides, we can get those integrated.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, thank you both for coming.
Thanks. Should have shown it down at the field where they're having a band.
That would be.
I can hear the band from here, and they sound pretty good.
The next article on our agenda is the National Grid, but that's not.
And, excuse me,
Yes,
before we leave town meeting, I know you're going to be discussing motions and assignments, speaking assignments later in the meeting. Unless you especially want me to rejoin for that, I will sign off, but I'm happy to come back if you would like me to.
I think that's pretty much procedural, and you should enjoy your evening.
Go listen to music, right?
Or,
I think it is procedural. I'll just add one suggestion, which I always make, is that whoever is going to be the speaker on a particular article should also be the person to make the motion.
Mhm.
And I will collect the assignments from Greg tomorrow.
Thank you very much for keeping us in line.
My pleasure, always. Thank you, have a good evening.
Yes.
I'm gonna open the window so I can listen to the band. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. For the next 25 minutes, Greg, could you give us the town administrator's report?
I can, and I did just send along, the
But did you
briefing
just
memo.
send that?
I don't know what happened, it was, I should have gotten that on Saturday, I apologize for that. Yes, my report, just review calendars, on the 22nd, so Thursday of this week, we have a public forum, final public forum on the village vulnerability project. So that's taking a look at ways to mitigate flooding challenges that we will face going forward in the village area. And then the consultants then will wrap up their final report and get that report to you and talk about next steps.
You should, is that something available for the public, or is that,
Yes, so that'll be a public forum on Thursday evening, 6:30.
what are we doing to publicize it?
So it's been pushed out through our normal channels.
Okay.
And, the steering committee is meeting tomorrow night, and the public forum will be on Thursday night. So we have that coming up. And then, of course, the Governance Project meeting is meeting on the 27th. And then, of course, the 28th is the special town meeting with the July parade on the 4th. And then Thursday, the 6th, will be your next regular meeting after tonight.
Is there anything in particular we need to do for the 4th of July?
Need to get the golf cart
Golf cart, yes.
and order enough American
Flags.
flags,
We
little
were
flags to
short.
hand out.
Well, yeah, or maybe we need to be a little more selective at the beginning, but yeah, where do we get American flags?
Everyone under 12 gets one. That's the-
That's, yeah. I can circle back with you on that.
Super.
And the golf carts are usually loaned to us
Mhm.
by Essex. So we just need to get in touch with them a couple of weeks in advance.
Mhm.
Um,
Since you've taken on the flag, could you get in touch with Essex?
I would happily get in touch with Essex, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And do you want me to just go ahead and get the flags?
Sure.
I mean, Debbie might have gotten those, but I
Yeah,
can,
we can help with that.
I'll be on top of flags and carts.
Super.
Oh, and you need water.
What are you coming for?
Because you're going to get the water.
You're gonna get the coolers for the water.
I
Ice.
don't recall raising my hand.
You weren't talking, so we volunteered.
Where do I get that?
Just kidding. Okay,
We can talk separately. Figure this out.
It's not me. I'm a little out of sorts here.
Okay. So, and then your second meeting in July will be July 17th. So then, School Street, after some waitings, delays with the contractor in terms of them waiting for the equipment, in terms of grinding, things, the final blacktop is down. So that's in much better shape. Obviously, some cleanup work remains, including putting the striping down. That's in much better shape than it was, so that's helping. We should not have any major detours as that finishes up. One of the action items was talking about compensation for department heads. And I think it would make sense to proceed with a formal compensation study, comparison study, so that we have a sort of third-party confirmation of where our salaries stand with other communities. So I'll be getting some quotes on that and presenting that to you hopefully at the next meeting. But then, just want to give you a heads up that I think that's a step we should take, and you can be thinking about that, but I would like to proceed and get those quotes. And we can talk a little bit more about that at the next meeting. But in addition to the comparisons, it would also have an expert in the field give us some guidance on how we might, options for restructuring some of our approaches to pay for department leaders. So we talked about merit and perhaps get some guidance on how to set that up as an alternative to the sort of standard COLA approach. So that would be part of that study.
How long do you think it would take?
It's a couple, 3-month project. Yeah, so by the fall, we should be able to have that in hand, which would be timely in terms of budget discussions, and if there were to be any adjustments that we want to go forward with earlier rather than later, it could be something we could talk about for the fall town meeting. So it would tee that up pretty well for us on either option in terms of proceeding with that.
And if I may, do you have an idea of which departments would need to be looked at first? Is there sort of do you know which ones might be in need?
This would do across the board, so the study would look at all departments. So it would collect data across the board.
And that's including looking at, as it says here, the assistants or the.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So that plays into succession planning and all that.
Correct,
Okay,
exactly.
good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Exactly right.
Yep.
And then my other note here was on senior center. We're continuing to wait for some responses. Hopefully by next meeting. I've been saying that a few times now, but hopefully at our next meeting we'll have some definitive report to get back to you on. So we continue to pursue. I would say we've got 3 options in the hopper, and so hope to have more information on all 3 by your next meeting. So those were the 4 things I wanted to go over.
Okay,
There are 2 correspondences, if I can
yes,
just proceed with that.
certainly.
And one is from the Agricultural Technical School. So they have approved a bond for construction of a new veterinary program building. Quote you the amount, 3 million something.
Yeah, that was a change.
Have it here. Yeah, so just under 3.4 million, 3.3676 million. So we will see that as part of our assessment down the road once that is completed. Our percentage is quite small in terms of the total enrollment. Our 12, 13 students, part of that whole school is a very small fraction. So we don't own a big portion of this debt. It's less than 1% of the total debt, but it will impact our assessment going forward.
We currently have some assessment or debt
Yes.
that we're
For
paying down for
the
them.
building, for the main building that was redone, or not redone, but the new building that was built, how many years ago now? A few years ago. So yes, that's part of our
It's still current,
assessment, yes,
okay.
yes.
And one of the things, apparently, it will fall over onto us if we don't act. We from the time that we got the notification, we've got 45 days.
Right.
I think, what is the feeling of the board? Should we call another town meeting to consider this, or should we just assume that even if we vote no?
You'll be outvoted. Not to be fatalistic.
I don't think we have much of an option with this one, do we? Not and have students attend.
So it is the consensus of the board that we just, let this happen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Rather than let it happen, I would say accept that it will happen.
Okay.
Yes.
We guys just, it is
Yeah.
semantics, but
Okay, and then the other piece of correspondence,
mhm.
some concerns, again, Mill Street has been an issue in the past. I think it raised its head again primarily because of some of the detour efforts that were for School Street. And actually it happened again today with a pretty major accident on 128. People were getting off of the highway and going along Mill to get around the accident on the highway. Going
And the
north.
accident that occurred at the corner of School and, wasn't that School and
School
Pleasant?
and Pleasant, the other day with the car was up near the bench.
Where the bench, yeah. And, I mean, in addition, I think we have bigger, faster vehicles. We have a nice speedy road on School Street right now. It's wide, it's not lined yet. It's a town-wide problem, and it's not just town-wide, it's everywhere wide. People are going much faster.
One of the things that was specifically asked was whether it would be possible to work with the Essex County Club to have an alternate pedestrian, because there's no room for a sidewalk, and it's a scenic drive, so we can't cut down trees, but perhaps there could be some other
Oh, a path,
path
Right.
yes, through the wood, basically.
through
Is
the
that,
woods, basically,
Yeah.
and
yeah, and so, right, as an alternative to a sidewalk or something.
as a way to avoid having pedestrians in the mix with
Right.
cars.
Pedestrians with their dogs, because this specific individual talks about, and I think that would need to be,
Right, that was an idea that was kicked
Yeah.
around, it didn't go anywhere, but it doesn't mean we couldn't revisit it to see if it is a possibility.
How did we leave this a year ago? We pushed around a number of ideas and
So we put up additional
I think
stop
we said-
signs.
okay.
speed limit.
So there are a couple more stop signs on Forest to try to keep traffic at a slower pace.
Yeah, but on Mill, and specifically
But
this walking
specifically
area.
Mill, in this stretch,
I know we've spoken of speed bumps,
right,
We didn't
Uh,
widen the one
speed
culvert.
plates, or what do they call those things?
speed table.
Tables, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
But I don't think we did any, I think maybe the chief did some studies on speeds there. Did we get a report on that? We must have.
Yeah.
We did, we got in from, but I mean,
I just don't remember.
the other day I was driving down Pleasant and a car went flying by me the other way and I could read the speed limit sign that said it's 25 there. The guy was doing 39. That was one. The other day I was on Pine Street going to work and big old truck pulled out and bombed in front of me, going significantly faster, and not to put anybody under the wheels of the bus. The police car was parked right there, ostensibly checking speeds, monitoring speeds. This guy was bombing down the road. And I don't know what the answer is. They try to get out there and give a presence, and I think short of hiring more police officers who can then be out giving tickets. We just don't have the manpower to have people out there constantly monitoring and ticketing. So I
So-
think that's,
We did discuss on a different subject, or a different street, when we're talking about Pine Street, the fact that Massachusetts state laws may not allow us to automate the
Correct.
ticketing.
You
Because
can't.
in other states, you just
Yes.
install the equipment
Right.
and they send you a ticket,
right,
it's that
it's
easy.
against the law in Massachusetts.
My question is, who do we need to talk to get the law changed?
Your senator, your
Right,
representative.
so is that worth pursuing? Because Becky is correct. In order to enforce, there's two ways of doing it, the human way or the automated way. And I don't have a good answer as to why the automated way is illegal. It works very well in other states. Even if you rent a car, you'll get the bill eventually.
Even if you rent a car in France, you get the bill.
Right,
Mhm.
so I don't know what the
Or-
hesitation is, but I think
Yeah.
it would be something that our town government should be advocating for, because it's real easy to do.
And I just want to underscore that it's not that we don't have
Right.
police trying to address this, we
Right.
just simply
Not enough of
haven't
them.
got the manpower to be out there 24/7 babysitting
4 major
speeds.
roads.
Yeah, any of me, yeah. So that would be to Bruce?
I'm just wondering if we should revisit the Mill Street bumps.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before we get that, I guess my question is, I'm not sure I got it answered. Who, is it Bruce Tar, is it
Sure.
And
Marie
Margaret?
and Margaret?
Both of
Yeah.
them.
So,
Both of them,
Both of
and
them?
Margaret and Bruce.
but is there
yeah.
somebody else, I guess I don't understand the why it's illegal. Sometimes when a law is created, there's a particular reason for it, right? And I'm not sure that our representatives would be the ones to answer the why. Is there somebody actually who works for the
Town
executive
council?
branch that could answer the why
I'm
question?
sure that's been discussed quite a bit. I know they're in Rhode Island,
They're all over.
because I've seen them seen them there in various spots. But that's the only state.
Yeah.
I haven't seen them in New Jersey, have not
In
seen them in New
Texas,
York,
they're
have
in
not seen them in
Texas.
Pennsylvania.
You can get, they're definitely in Texas and
Are
that's
they?
where a lot of my colleagues. have
Okay,
been.
I mean, that,
So I just,
Illinois.
I just.
They're in
think we need
Illinois?
to-
Chicago has them.
Right.
okay.
When my daughter went there, we encountered that.
Okay. Perhaps the staff to,
We could try to do some homework on it.
Yes, could you? Because that's obviously a much wider question.
Did anybody email back the,
I sent something back to the letter saying that, part of the problem almost certainly is the traffic that's come out because of School Street,
mhm,
and that, we would revisit this in the fall. And that we would include looking at a pedestrian path. But that's land that belongs to somebody else, so no promises. We have 5 minutes before the, can we open the public hearing 5 minutes early?
mhm.
No, okay,
Yeah, you really should, well.
okay,
you know,
let's,
You can read your memo.
Yes.
yeah.
Take a break.
Do we have a brief liaison report?
I did, I don't know.
I can speak to Parks and Rec.
Yes.
Pine Street Fields are on schedule, it should be ready. There's the sod going down, I believe, in the end of June.
Mhm.
So they'll be up and running for the fall, but certainly completed all the site work.
Got a question about that,
Yes,
not a hard one.
because I went too hard.
What do we do about naming that field?
It's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't think it's ever discussed, other than it's Pine
Well, I
Street,
think we ought to think about that.
John Round Field.
Or are you suggesting a
I-
revenue enhancing naming rights?
There you go.
I guess that can be monetized if we want, but really, I don't know. I think it's something, I don't know how the other fields have been named, they're all named for significant,
We got Brook Street Field.
That was
and
difficult.
very creative.
The Brook Street is
Now Coach
actually
Field
the
Field.
Coach Field.
It's Coach Field.
Coach Field playground.
But take it back to Parks and
I'll
Rec
discuss it-
about
I'll
and
discuss it
say,
with
all
Sean,
right,
let's see
come
what
on,
you
let's
wanna
come
do."
up with some ideas and.
So, monitorizing might
I like
not be
the
a bad idea
naming
either.
rights.
Cell signaling field.
There you go.
Yeah, oh, there you go.
I was looking for a cell signaling Highland Field at cell signaling. We'll start small. And the only other item, well, the beach is, after that one big day, there hasn't been beach. There hasn't been weather.
It's been
So
cool ever
that's-
since.
yeah. So they've got that under control. There are discussions as to monitoring the circle and drop off. There's discussion about, especially on busy days, kids are having some issues and they're looking at ways of getting an old, maybe uniformed police or some kind of authoritative looking individual at the circle. And finally, pickleball. Noise is, there's still complaints from the same neighbors. A sound report was delivered to Parks and Rec on Wednesday, just prior to their meeting. No one had a chance to review it. It's a lengthy document and will be discussed at next month's meeting. In the interim, I know that Cheryl, all of last week, was there at 8 o'clock every morning and had swung by a couple of times to ask people to leave at 8 o'clock at night. So Parks and Rec are doing yeoman's work as far as monitoring that, there's, to see if we can re-educate the players. And that's what's going on in Parks and Rec.
Somebody have a 2-minute report?
Do you want to approve the minutes of May 8th?
We could certainly do that.
I must abstain from that one.
Is there a motion to accept the minutes of May 8th?
I'll make that motion to accept the 8 minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Brian?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
I vote yes. John?
Yes.
Okay. It's close enough.
59.
I get a motion to open a public hearing on the where's the one I need her. Open a public hearing in room 5 to deal with a request from National Grid to install 1/4-inch is it 1 1/4? 1.4?
No, 1 4-inch.
1 4-inch PVC conduit encased in concrete from pole 23 to the property of 109-111 Pine Street.
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
Alright. Becky?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I say yes.
Yes.
Okay. Getting,
Savita Mahabir Shihi, representing National Grid, 44 River Street, Beverly, Massachusetts. This is to provide service for this particular property. Upgraded service.
upgrade service. We have a report from Charles Dow. Is there any discussion on?
No.
Straightforward to me.
Cindy,
Okay.
Cindy Conway at 110 Pine, is this an appropriate time for me to ask questions?
Yes,
As I said, Cindy Conway at 110 Pine, I was just curious, so there was previously a house at that location, I know it's been, completely revamped, I don't have a lot of knowledge about electricity, but just curious, why there's a different conduit going in, and what effect that may have on, I guess, the load for that pole, which I think must feed our house as well.
When they redesigned the house, they put the meter and the panel on the other side of the house. So the service coming off the existing pole will be removed and the new service will be going in at the new location.
Is there a change to what that service being delivered is, though? I think that's one of the questions, if I'm not mistaken, Cindy.
Yes, thank you.
Not significant and not to the transformer at that location.
So it would have absolutely no impact on the other neighbors?
Should not have a problem with the other neighbors, not considering the load on that particular transformer.
Okay. Okay, Cindy?
And is that then, that's then going to underground, where I believe the rest of the houses are above ground?
That is what the customer had
Mhm.
planned and put before, I believe, the planning board also.
Okay.
It does say underground here.
Are there any plans to put the other homes underground?
You would have to, they're paying for this to be done for
Okay,
them.
okay. When you say that a significant change in service, what exactly does that mean?
It's no significant change for their service.
How about for ours?
The transformer load is not sufficient to cause a problem for your service.
Okay. Do you have any idea when this is going to happen?
They are not allowed to dig or get a permit to dig until this petition passes.
Okay. And about how long does that work take?
It shouldn't take more than a day for them to do the work. National Grid's not doing the work, their contractor is.
Okay. And would there be any interruption in service during that time?
Not for anyone else, no.
Okay. And I assume we'll get notification if there's going to be work on, of when that's going to happen?
This was the notification.
Oh, so we won't get notification of the actual day that it's going to take place? Start date.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I look for a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, Brian?
No.
Becky?
Yes.
Brian, you meant no, there's no
I
discussion?
have nothing to say. That was the question, right?
The question was, yes, shall we close the evidentiary?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
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 I vote yes, John votes yes. Okay, thank you very much.
I make a motion to approve the application of National Grid to install one 4-inch PVC conduit encased in concrete from pole number 23 to the property of 109 and 111 Pine Street, with the conditions stipulated by DPW Chuck Dam.
Second.
Discussion? Brian? How would you vote on this?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
I vote yes.
And I vote yes.
Now, I thank you again.
Thanks. Have a
Nice to
good
get
evening.
at least some more wires underground.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wish we could get them all underground.
We get 4 more minutes.
Okay.
Annual reappointments.
Annual reappointments.
Do you want a motion to approve the annual
I'd like a motion to approve the annual.
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion? Ready for the vote? Brian?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
I vote yes.
And I vote yes.
Okay. So, next year will be different.
One day, do you want a motion for the one-day alcohol license for
Yes.
Greater Cape Ann Chamber? Per submission, I move to approve the one-day alcohol license for Greater Cape Ann Chamber.
Second.
Is there discussion? Meeting ready to vote. Brian?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
I vote yes.
And I vote yes.
The Squad 3 pumper bill of sale. Already
That's a
discussed.
little different. Yes.
Is there a motion to approve the bill of sale as presented in our packet?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Ready to vote? Brian?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Yes.
Okay. We assume we need to sign that?
I can sign that on your behalf, but we do have
Okay.
Liquor alcohol
The-
license.
yes, yeah, and the National Grid.
Okay,
So there's 3 pieces of paper to sign.
okay.
We also have the Festival by the Sea.
Yes, that was the,
Chamber.
that's chamber, right?
Is there a motion to approve the Festival by the Sea on August 5th as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion? Is the meeting ready to vote?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
I vote yes.
John votes yes.
Excellent.
Two minutes.
Where do I want?
I'm gonna read Greg's attachment. Alright. Look at that one.
Okay. My iPhone says it's 7:10. And I suggest that we take up the request from the beach bums for a livery service.
Thank you for taking the time to meet with us again. Really appreciate it. We thought about everything that you guys have said about the traffic and everything, and we have a plan to solve that. And we're just waiting on license now.
Mhm.
So,
How are you solving the traffic problem?
so we're just gonna act as a normal car, and then one of us is gonna be at the top of the circle, ask people if they need rides, and we're gonna use walkie-talkies to communicate with each other. We're not gonna disobey any traffic laws. We're pretty much just gonna be another car on the road, picking up and dropping people off. So there really shouldn't be an issue with traffic for us.
Are you still planning to rent umbrellas and beach chairs?
So that's like not our number one priority. Like we would love to do that in the future, but right now we're more like focused on the golf cart transportation.
Greg, I think we had legal counsel look at this.
Yes. Yeah, so legal counsel does feel it is something that you can permit, but it would qualify as a livery service that that allows you to say yes or no, because of our local ordinance. The advice from council is that since you two gentlemen will not be actually owning the cart, that I guess one of your fathers is the owner, and so that we should have the father's name on the license as well, and then the proof of insurance. But beyond that, he felt that state law does allow such a service, and it would be up to you as a matter of local decision-making, whether or not to approve it.
Is there discussion? Becky?
I have a question. There are a couple of things I'm reading here, and one is, now you said car or cart? Are you still planning on the golf cart?
Golf cart, yes,
Okay,
but we're gonna act as a normal car.
okay. And neither of you has a junior operator's license, you have your full license?
Full license, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions?
The only thing that came up, I think, from the discussion last time is there was a discussion of trial Monday through Friday as opposed to the weekend.
Yes.
Have you guys got any comments or thoughts on that?
We feel that we should be allowed to run whenever, and it would probably be more beneficial for us and for everyone else to run on the weekends, just because Monday through Friday, people can park at the beach, so we don't think there'd be as much foot traffic through the weekdays. So that's why we feel like that Friday, Saturday, Sunday would probably work better for us.
We would be open to a trial period though, just during the week.
I would like, I think Monday through Friday, definitely, and I'd like to look at a couple of weekends and then revisit this.
I don't think we're testing anything if we just do it Monday through
I
Friday.
would agree with that.
If you want
I
to
think
try it,
Monday-
let's try it on the weekend.
So you can work the kinks out Monday through Friday
Yeah.
and get ready for the weekend, but I'd like to maybe revisit this in a couple of weekends. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I've heard nothing but positive response from people in town,
Mhm.
and I think it's, you applaud you for your ingenuity and give it a shot,
We have a meeting
On the 6th.
on the 6th of July,
which is 4th of July weekend.
which is after,
Well,
Yeah.
after, so
well, I mean,
Yeah.
4th of
that gives
July
us
coming
that
up.
gives us 2 weekends.
Would you be willing to come back for our July 6th meeting?
Yeah, we'd love to.
I do have another question. Will you be offering anything else? I know in here also that will you be selling water, anything like that?
As far as we know right now, we don't think we're gonna expand our business into that yet. Maybe next summer we would be open to that, but
Because
for now it's just
that
a
opens
shuttle.
up a whole
Yeah,
different
yeah,
avenue
yeah.
of licensing, and
Yeah,
that's why I
Yes,
asked.
Not right now.
No.
Not now.
Baby steps,
Yeah, let's
right?
work on getting the kinks out first.
First step. Okay.
We'll shoot our headlights here.
Yeah, another question. So this is a standard, it's a golf cart, right?
Yeah.
Are you gonna have some sort of a rack you're gonna put on the back or something? I mean, you're transporting people because they got stuff. Well, maybe they don't wanna walk, but mostly they got stuff.
Yeah.
So are you planning to do something like that?
Can I start?
Yeah.
So
Just
the,
for,
I'm
you
Kevin.
identify yourself,
yeah, I'm Kevin Potter, Preston's father,
and you are at your address.
23 Norwood.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
So the golf cart is 6 passengers, the 2 in the rear
In
can
the
fold
face-
down to a flat
Oh.
surface, and you could bungee cord or put stuff on there in the back if they had to. So that would eliminate 2 seats, but there is room for
okay,
that.
so you can swap out seats for the,
Correct.
all right, then you'll make that up as you go along.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Are there,
I just want to make sure that we have, I mean, this is a provisional to see how it goes until July 6th. Do we have any proof of insurance at this point?
We can
So
get the
I was,
insurance.
obviously, until it got approved and actually purchased the vehicle, I couldn't get an actual insurance policy, but I have been in contact with my insurance company and agent, and it's definitely insurable and liability insurance and everything like that, so it's like insuring a boat or,
We would need that before
sure, absolutely,
anything starts.
sure.
But so, would it be acceptable that they present those materials, the proof of insurance, and the application with the parent's father's name on it, to the town clerk
What would it be? Yeah.
or to Debbie?
Who
Yeah.
issues the actual license that they
So it
need to
comes out of
carry
your
with them?
office.
Okay.
It comes out,
So it
comes
should
out
go
of
to
the selectman's
Debbie.
office, selectman's
Okay.
office.
Okay.
So it'd be something that you all would sign,
Mhm.
once we have received the
Sure.
the requisite proof of insurance and
Right.
the signed application.
Are there other comments? Is there a motion to approve the application of the beach bums to provide living service with conditions that?
I was gonna say, before we do that, is the motion being conditional upon successful?
Conditioned upon proof of insurance, a license application that includes the owner of the vehicle, and probably a condition that if the police find that they are interfering with traffic, that they will stand back.
I thought we were doing a provisional few weeks.
That's perfect, yeah, and we will review the working of the Kathy.
Question for Mr. Potter. So how long will it actually take for you to purchase the vehicle? Sounds like you don't have it yet, right? So you
Yeah,
need
I-
our approval for something,
Sure.
right?
Mhm.
So that he can then purchase the vehicle. It's the sequence here I'm going over, right?
So you approve it conditioned on receipt of
Okay.
the proof of insurance and the signed application.
Okay.
So, but you can grant approval tonight.
Okay, so then my question is, how long will it actually take you to get the vehicle? Because if we want to do a check after a trial period, I
Sure.
want to make sure you have enough time to actually buy the vehicle and get it here.
Sure, absolutely. So it depends on, like, it's like a car, right? If they have it right there, I can go purchase it like that day. Or it could take a little bit longer if they had to ship it in or get it from somewhere. When's the meeting after the 6th?
July 6th.
Is
It's on
it-
the 18th.
It'll be the 17th.
I mean, I would love it if I could have till then, because it may be a good week or so. Obviously, I can't get insurance until I have the vehicle.
Right, that's my point, is I don't want to
so-
box him into having a 2-day trial period if he
Right,
hasn't even
and
got the
I was
vehicle.
thinking that, so I would love it if they could have, because realistically, it's probably gonna be a good week or so before it starts anyway, so that wouldn't leave much time.
So jump right into the fire, huh? 4th of July weekend. Nice.
Yes.
Great, so looking for a motion to approve the application conditioned on the proof of insurance, Mr. Potter's signature on the license, and a review on July 17th.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? Meeting ready to vote. Brian,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
I say yes.
And I say yes.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much, guys.
I hope the sun shines.
I
No, really?
We really need.
Well, for
Thank you
now.
guys, appreciate it. And would I follow up with, is it Debbie?
Yes,
With any
in my
questions or
office.
follow-up?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Sidewalks and material discussion at 7:20.
No,
Probably water resource.
no sidewalks is at 7:20.
Okay, I've got an old one then.
Yeah, you got an old one.
So that is 4. Okay.
I see Nate DeRosa is here.
Yeah, Chuck's here also.
Okay.
So you've asked to, do a comparison of asphalt versus concrete and granite. So we can both Nate and Chuck can walk through some of those comparisons. You should have, did you receive that as well? You should have received a cost comparison of the two.
I just have what you had in your note.
Yeah,
Okay.
just.
There was a comparison of the School Street as an
No,
example.
That was so I did not see something in the package, and I asked Chuck for some information. You were copied on that email. I think he just replied to me.
Right, I had attached it to the email that apparently didn't get
Oh.
to everybody. So, I didn't do it to what I just sent an hour ago.
Oh,
So-
I'm sorry, there are other, no, I don't see anything else.
So, yeah, apparently you didn't get that. But so Nate and Chuck can walk through that cost comparison of the two. We can certainly get that to you.
That's probably a good thing, because not everyone who might be interested in this gets those pieces of correspondence from you. Or are they in the materials? So,
There was a supplement that I had sent out
Right.
with my briefing memo, which did not.
Just now.
trying to imagine that somebody might want to come back to this meeting at some point, and,
That would be included in the package, yes.
okay. So,
What would be helpful? Would you like to have Chuck and Nate sort of walk through sort of an
Mm-hmm.
overview
yes.
of the two?
Mhm.
So, Chuck and Nate, who has the short straw here?
I guess I'll start this one because Nate's going to be deep on the touch point.
Yeah, okay.
So I guess, where to start? So did everybody get the spreadsheet or no?
No.
No.
Okay, so, Kathy reached out with a couple specific questions, but I'll just answer kind of some of my general answers in, looking at, kind of available information and industry standards, looking at concrete versus asphalt. The rule of thumb that, I've always kind of gone with when kind of ballparking these things is concrete costs about double upfront, but it lasts about twice as long. So there's not really a life cycle gain. It's more just, it's more just along the lines of, what are you looking to gain in aesthetic, and what is your maintenance schedule, things like that. So, certainly when you have disruptions in the sidewalk, when you're starting new, there's the capital expense, and then when we're maintaining them, over the course of time before we get back to that street, we also, have to think about the ease of the repairs and what kind of repairs we're making. So that's kind of generally where I started. Another kind of big element that we kind of have to live by is, and what you're seeing in the spreadsheet when you get around to looking at it is, we bid this as a unit cost contract. So this applies right now. It's a multi-year contract with our paving contractor, which includes sidewalk work. And when we're doing that, we basically get a unit price item for everything under the sun. And one of those items is asphalt sidewalks, and one of those items is concrete sidewalks. And so what Nate and I put together was kind of a, applying it to School Street and using kind of real world quantities. We're looking at essentially an upcharge to move to concrete of, roughly 500,000, a little bit more. So on a round numbers, $1.2 million job, we're looking at $1.7 million job to upgrade the concrete to concrete. Another piece of that 500,000 is, we don't have granite sidewalks existing all the way up School Street, so we would have to also apply the new unit item for granite, as opposed to in some areas on School Street, we have the asphalt berm. Asphalt berm, much cheaper, obviously, than granite sidewalks or granite curbing. There's pluses and minuses to, beyond just the, numbers in terms of capital expense. Obviously, asphalt is something that we do quite a bit, whether it's pothole repairs or, sidewalk repairs, just spot repairs, I'll call it. When you get into concrete, you typically, when, like, say, National Grid was on a hearing earlier, if they were opening up a concrete sidewalk, they'd have to saw cut that concrete. They'd probably put back their conduit, and then they'd put in their asphalt, and then come back at some other time and pull the entire concrete panel and put that panel on. So and we would have to undergo that same kind of thing where we have, say, a tree root that upheaves a concrete panel and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more involved when you get to the kind of repairs. And, of course, in town, we don't have concrete a lot, so we're not doing those repairs as much, but we are doing a lot of asphalt. We have, several on-call contractors to do, this asphalt maintenance. So that's kind of the starting point for concrete versus asphalt. Another thing that's more of an aesthetic, but right now the old school granite that we see on School Street, that's kind of about 8 inches wide, it's really hard to get that. So you get what they call the new granite, which is usually 6 or 7 inches wide, and so it doesn't really look the same. So when we go to do the Pine Street sidewalk extension, we are planning to use granite, but that will be a different look than the granite on School Street. So, we're already mixing matching asphalt, I suppose, with the granite, but it's just another kind of thing. So I don't know if there's any other questions specifically, I'll get it. I think another kind of point that Kathy wanted to make, and I generally understand and agree with to a certain extent, is are we keeping up with the maintenance, whether it's concrete or asphalt? And I guess when we hear about the kind of our standard operating procedure in terms of maintenance is, if somebody reports a problem, we go out and fix it. We could be more proactive, I suppose, in that. But we do generally look at what projects we have upcoming, what's kind of in the pipeline. And so some things admittedly just sit, but we also don't have a budget that allows us to just go and do sidewalks for a month straight, which is what might be required if we wanted every sidewalk in town to have the same level of service. So I don't know, is there any kind of other questions?
So let me clarify if I could, Chuck. Thank you, by the way, for all of the information that you did send. It was very much appreciated. I just wanted to clarify one of the points that you made and attributed to me. My main kind of pet peeve here, and I'm seeing it in the spreadsheet that everybody else will see, but I'm also seeing it in the Rotunda presentation we're going to talk about in 20 minutes. We are only comparing investment, installation cost, and that is not how one typically would do a comparison of a capital endeavor. Okay, you've got to look at total cost of ownership, which should include maintaining the asset so that it is safe and whatever, I'm not seeing to your point, proactive maintenance built into these numbers. And based on what you're telling us, I presume that the asphalt would have to be maintained more frequently because it doesn't last as long. And that's not figured into the analysis. And whenever you do a big capital investment, I'm just not accustomed to only looking at installation costs.
Well, I think
So that's what I'm kind of trying to understand.
Yeah, but that's not true. So the numbers in that spreadsheet apply not only to, those are unit price items. So conceivably, if you were to do an extra 100 feet of sidewalk as a repair or maintenance, you can price that as asphalt or you can price that as concrete, and the unit price still applies.
That's not,
And
yeah, but
when I say that the time, the life cycle of 20 years versus 40 years, that does include, because you're not saying that the concrete's gonna break down in less spots. You're just saying when it breaks down at that one spot, because the tree is there, you have a certain quantity that you have to replace. And it generally follows the same principle of it costs twice as much to make that repair.
right, but I guess what I would expect to see in a capital analysis is and you pick a time frame, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, whatever makes the most sense for the asset you're talking about. And you say, here's the total cost of ownership. $1.2 million for the investment and, $50,000, I'm making numbers up here, $50,000 a year to maintain it properly so that it is safe and, not crumbling. That's to me total cost of ownership, and you price out those numbers over a chosen time frame depending on the lifespan of the assets, and you compare the two, and that gives you a better full sense as to what we should be investing in the sidewalk. So I agree with you, Chuck. We're probably not investing enough so that your team can do more, but I think part of the reason for that is we may not be looking at the total cost of ownership and understanding what that means. And when we do, if we pick Central Street and just say, hey, on Central Street we want, what's the total cost of moving to cement sidewalks and granite for Central Street? Just pick one street and say, here's what it would cost, total cost, over 10 years or 20 years, whatever it is. And, you look at your break-even point. I mean, we're just having.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't agree with that kind of in this instance. So
okay,
I get life cycle costs. That's not my issue. My issue is that first of all, like you're saying, look at the 5 to 10 years. We don't anticipate any maintenance costs in the first 5 to 10 years because there's a moratorium on opening the street, and so that's not something I would expect to get back to. However, things happen and emergencies happen and that might happen. So, but I would still take the same unit and apply it to, okay, let's say 10% of the sidewalk is going to fail over 10 years. It's the same 10%, whether it's asphalt or concrete, you're applying a different unit price. So the unit price is going to hold to roughly double. Now, I could, give it more thought and numbers, but that's just not the way I would program a street LCA. Like that's just not, I think, worth my time. So, that being said, I think that there is an element of, should we look at the total assets we have in town and their numbers? I did send you the look at the, our inventory, I guess, of sidewalks and roadway as well. And I could, we could kind of take a better look at the amount of backlog. And, like you said in your email, we have, say, 90%, this is true in the water main system too, but, if 90% of our assets are over 10 years old, then we should expect that, we have more maintenance to do and therefore that number should change. But that's different, I think, than applying the numbers to School Street, on year 0. That's just, I don't think, worth our time.
Jan, if I may?
Yes.
To Chuck. Chuck, I guess when I bring up sidewalks and macadam, my thought is less, what you all are or are not doing. It's more, what do the townspeople want and what are they willing to pay for what they want? Because if the town wants concrete and granite curbing, then and they have the information of what the costs are, not just the immediate cost of installation, procurement and installation, but as Kathy said, maintenance. And therefore, it's not, I'm not saying what we have is what it is because of the DPW. I'm just saying that if we wish to modify it, we need to ask the townspeople.
We don't know what to ask them for.
I don't mean to sound like, I'm defending, every sidewalk in town. I'm just kind of looking at our general approach over the last 5 years.
Right.
And, we've certainly made progress in some streets for various reasons and others not as much. And another thing that we, have to try and take into account is, upcoming work, previous work that's in progress. And so, is it worth even if our numbers say, we should be investing so much in this and, are we looking for a project for the sake of finding a project, or are we waiting waiting, to year 3 when, maybe it needs it in year 2. Like that's just something that I have to deal with on a, annual basis, so.
Right, well, one of my questions that I had regarding asphalt versus granite, the curbing is, when I look at the curbs on School Street, they're angled, whereas a granite curb, you hit a granite curb and you know it, you're gonna stop. Whereas the asphalt curbing on School appears to be at an angle.
Yeah.
Is that,
It's more forgiving too.
it's a
Trust
lot
me.
more forgiving if you hit it with Brian tire, for example.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a thing that, we were just trying to match what was existing. We get it both ways, because, some people will call and say, I want the aesthetic of the granite, it looks nicer, it's rugged, but then, the second their landscaper has to park to do their lawn, and they can't pull up on the sidewalk, they get upset, so.
Well, they shouldn't
and,
be pulling
that's
up
not-
on the
it's
sidewalk
case by
anyway.
case, you know?
I've just got one question to Kathy's point. Chuck, is there a significant difference for annual maintenance between asphalt and concrete? Or is it the same cost?
Yeah, so I guess that right now we don't have a lot of concrete out there. So I wouldn't be looking for an increase in budget to do the corresponding work on concrete. We would be repairing asphalt with more asphalt. So if we need to, make that money go further, we would need to add money to that budget. So I guess, there's only really concrete downtown. We have replaced a couple panels downtown, and it's not cheap because you basically have to order a full truck of concrete, but it's not inordinate amount of money. So I don't know right what kind of answer you want me to give. It's case by case, right? Like, I'm not sure.
I've got a question, Chuck. To add one more variable, what about granite curbs and asphalt sidewalks? Which is what, is a good chunk of sidewalks here that are structured that way.
Yeah.
And I don't see that necessarily, obviously with a granite curb and a granite and a cement sidewalk, it's a lot of money, difference-wise.
Yep.
What's the difference if it were granite curbs and asphalt sidewalks?
So I'm looking for the number right now, but it's basically, I think, $6 a foot for the asphalt, and I want to say $75 a foot for the installed granite, but I mean that's the type of number. So it's factor of 10.
I didn't follow that.
So we did all the asphalt curbing for about $24,000. If we had switched that to granite curbing, it would have been about $300,000.
Okay, and in that instance, you weren't considering the sidewalks at all?
No, that's
correct.
That's
just the curbing.
Okay, it's just the curbing. So the curbing is 10 times more expensive. And I don't know, what is the expense differential for the sidewalks? Just the sidewalks alone?
The hot mix was, call it $220,000, and the cement sidewalks would be $494,000.
All right, so that's,
Okay,
it's about double. It's the curbs is where the money is.
Yep.
Curbs is where the money is.
so that's a really good point, John,
That's-
because there are places on Central Street where you have the granite curbing, but you have the asphalt, and it
And then-
deteriorates very quickly.
Okay, well,
And so that's, it's a good point.
so in that instance, downtown, I would think that cement, because it's not that much more expensive, is a more serious consideration. When you start to get outside of the downtown area, I know that becomes impractical. But the granite curbs do, I'm not saying going way out of town, but they certainly look nicer than the asphalt curbs.
But this is also
And so
something that I think that we need to ask people, because I've had quite a few people say to me, see a black macadam, and
I think what we're saying is, or what I would like to see personally is I would like to understand what it would take, because to John's point, a lot of the downtown already has the granite curb.
Yeah.
What would it take to replace the asphalt sidewalk with cement from a budget
I
standpoint?
think this is a case that the downtown improvement committee.
Yeah.
Well, they already, there, and that's part of their plan.
So,
And so what I'm requesting is a cost. What would that take?
but I think we don't want to go in advance of the downtown improvement.
And that actually is part of, they've got another phase two
Right, they've got
that's
another
being
phase two.
discussed.
Well, but you know, in round figures, that concrete will be double the cost of the asphalt, and it should last twice as long.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so they did price it out that way. You guys got the presentation a couple weeks ago, you know, these treatments where, and, you know, so on and so forth, but they do have a conceptual level cost for, you know, that entire work, and one of the elements of that cost is the sidewalks going, and they're only pricing it as concrete. You know, when we go to bid it, we can, you know, apply unit prices, or we can bid it, you know, A versus B, but I guess I'm with you, like, we'll do concrete downtown if that's the aesthetic that people want, like, it's not a
I think
problem.
the only thing that troubles me about your statement, Chuck, is the word aesthetic. I understand that may be why it gets our attention. I'm talking about safety, okay? On Central Street, the sidewalks are tripping hazards. And so I do believe that following the downtown improvement committee's plan with some, you know, following up on that with some timeframes, I guess maybe that's what I'm looking for. When I say what would it take in terms of timing, and what would we have to present in front of what town meeting? Because obviously the culvert work is gonna start at some point. So what does that plan look like? Because I don't view this as an aesthetic issue solely. I do believe some of the sidewalks are not safe.
But I think.
Well, I guess I'm just saying, when I say aesthetic, I just mean that I'm saying that we're, the end goal, that
Yes.
the reason they're looking for concrete is the aesthetic. Now, if you want to, like, we can go out and pave it tomorrow for half the price and make it safe. But if we want to wait and not spend that money, only to spend double the price 3 years from now, or whatever that time frame is, then, you know, that's fine. But I wouldn't go out tomorrow and just do concrete sidewalks. Like, that's spending a lot of money when you're already planning on spending a lot of money.
If I may just briefly, if there are sidewalks that are unsafe and asphalt,
Yeah.
can they be repaired with spot repairs to make them safe?
Absolutely. And so, like this is the other part of my email to Kathy was, you know, we can certainly go out and do more maintenance. I'm not crying poor on that. Like, we have the budget. It's just, it's always a, you know, juggling act of, is it necessary in the short term when we have a medium term project coming behind it for whatever reason. Like, so, you know, last year we did Captain Dusty, you know, we did from the railroad tracks down to Captain Dusty's in asphalt because it was a safety hazard that needed to be addressed. We can do that again for Central Street. It just hasn't been part of the programming because, you know, frankly, I didn't think that it was unwalkable. You know, and we shouldn't, don't get me wrong, we don't have to wait until things are unwalkable before we fix them. But there's a lot of roads out there, and there's a lot of sidewalks that people want us to fix. So, like, we have to draw the line somewhere. Like, that's part of the, you know, making sure we make budgets and, you know, do things in a thoughtful progression. So, you know, I'm happy to take a look at it, and if it needs to be done, we can do it ahead of concrete, but we will do it in asphalt, and it will be safe.
One more point. Many years ago, I was told that when you resurfaced a road, you also resurfaced the sidewalks. This is long before your time. Is that in fact the program when a road is being resurfaced, ground and repaved, that you look at the sidewalks at the same time?
Yeah, we definitely look at it. I mean, like I said, some of our projects are more projects of opportunity. Some are projects of like in School Street, we did the full, 5 years ago, we did the drainage, we've done the sewer work, and we just did the water work, and, now we do the full width roadway work, which includes the sidewalk. We did the same on Forest Street. We did the same on Ocean Street, less the parts in front of the beaches that get hit every, winter. So,
My
there's
follow-on
a lot
question-
that goes into it, but we
my
we certainly
follow-up
look
question
at
is,
the whole road.
Does an asphalt sidewalk last about the same amount of time as an asphalt road?
Not necessarily. You'd hope to get longer. I mean, there's a lot more that's happening on the roadway. There's a lot more utilities that can fail. There's a lot more people that need to get into the roadway, and those are the points of failure. So whenever we do a road, like School Street, for instance, I will not approve a permit to dig up School Street for the next 7 years. So there'll be a 7-year moratorium. That's why I don't think there's really a maintenance cost that we would plan on in the next 7 years. Now, could National Grid come back to us next week and say we have an emergency situation on the gas main and we have to get into it? Yes, but we will make them pave the entire width, curb to curb or more. So that's how we mitigate against, those kind of issues. I think that was the answer to the question, but let me know.
I think this is primarily an informational session, and we've learned a lot about asphalt and cement and granite.
It's a lot.
The costs,
There's a lot that we consider at given times based on where we are in the life cycle, for sure.
Okay.
I think, can we move on?
Thank you, Nate.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
And, certainly, I'm relying on you guys, Lower Pine, Central, whatever. If there's issues that are safety issues, we will go out and address them. So don't be shy about letting us know about those things, for sure.
Personally speaking, my thought was it was partly the safety, but more that if the town wants a different look, they need to up the budget to the DPW and the support of that to the DPW. I certainly don't want to be making it seem as if anybody's not doing their job. It's more, if this is what we want, then the town needs to say so.
Mm-hmm.
Can we move on to the next point, facility case? Facility pier replacement. Oh, boy. I think we all got the handout. Nate, do you want to?
Yep. Hi, everyone. So tonight we're here to present the alternatives analysis that we've done for the Tux Point Phase 2 Rotunda analysis. With us tonight, we have Christine Player and Benjamin Foley with Foth Infrastructure. I think you guys should be familiar with both, as they've done much of our harbor work over the last few years. So with that, I'll leave it to Christine. Greg, if you could give Christine control so she can share her screen, she can put up the presentation.
Yep, just gave it to her.
See, I'm going to ask you to give control to Ben because he'll be presenting, but I'm happy to introduce myself as the client team leader for the Tux Point project. Nate, thanks for kind of the background. We've been heavily involved in a lot of waterfront development with the town for many years now. Formerly CLE Engineering. Over the last 5 years, we've been Foth Infrastructure. So we have completed phase 1, as I'm sure everybody here is aware of, and that was getting the floating dock, new gangway, extended gangway, pile-supported system in place. That was completed last May successfully. And when all this started, it was really mitigated by the age of the pier, and it's old. It needs to be replaced. And because of the cost, because of permitting challenges and things like that, we're taking this project as a phased approach. So we can check the box that we've successfully implemented phase 1, and here we are to transition into phase 2, which is really focusing on the pier structure, which supports the historic rotunda. And I'm going to turn it over to Ben. Our goal here is to really just give you guys a general overview. We've spent a lot of time looking at conceptual options that the replacement pier may consist of. And those options were initially defined in us collaborating with Nate and the recreational parks folks in terms of kind of scope of the different types of options we should consider. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my project engineer, Ben Foley, to present, give you hopefully a short presentation and a little bit of time for questions at the end of the conceptual alternatives that we have come up with.
Hi, everybody. I do not have access to share my screen, though. That is the only thing that I'm...
You should.
We can pitch it if I'm back there.
Yeah, I mean, if you have it. Unless I stop.
We gave you co-host ability.
Greg, you're really getting into this mastermind control.
Oh, here we go. There we are. Screen 2. Okay, so can everybody see that? Does that go?
Not yet.
Screen 2. There. Okay, awesome.
There we go.
Oh, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Okay, so as Christine introduced, kind of gave the first couple of slides. So we're here to present the touch point phase 2 pier replacement and rotunda preservation. It's the conceptual alternatives that we've come up with, again, with the town. So just kind of give you your bearings of the site. I'm sure everybody is familiar with the touch point pier and rotunda. So this project is, phase 1 was focusing on the floats and replacing the gangway system. Now phase 2 is dealing with the rotunda and the pier out there. So kind of what's bringing us here today. So in 2020, folks performed a conditional assessment just to determine and performed a conditional assessment that determined the service life of the structure was between 1 and 5 years, and we recommended periodic inspections, which we've been performing, and gave the town some repairs to extend that service life, just the minimal repairs to get us through to be able to develop these alternatives and present and get through permitting and all of that. So along with aging infrastructure, there's also changing environment. Currently, the pier is experiencing some overtopping with those extreme high tides that we get a couple times a year. And we also, as part of this project, we looked at the future replacement and having to require an elevation increase to address that overtopping, along with projected FEMA flood elevations and sea level rise for that 100-year storm event. This is just a zoomed in of that last one. So this is like the entire scope of our proposed alternative, the existing structure that's out there. So we have the solid fill wharf that's about a 60-foot structure in length that ties into the existing timber pier. That's about a 90-foot structure. They both sit at right around elevation 14 mean low water. So here's another section of what's out there. Like again, everybody I'm sure is familiar. So you have that solid fill section with a pile supported structure, including the timber piles, stringers, handrails, pier, and then that ties into the rotunda, which is also all timber. So as we move forward through developing our proposed alternatives, we had to decide on some design considerations and criteria. As we saw in phase one, we have to go with that steel rock socketed piles because of that high bedrock and the weak overburdened soil. We also we decided that keeping the pier ADA compliant was, we decided that we had to keep it ADA compliant. Along with that, we also determined that a pier deck elevation of 19 mean low water would be suitable for that, the flooding and future sea level rise that are tied together with the FEMA projections and the NOAA projections. And as part of that phase one effort, we're tying into that phase one effort and the existing backlands. And we also have to maintain the rotunda and the historic aesthetics at the site. It's just a continuation of that last slide. So these are the other rock socketed piles that are already there. So these will be used in this phase two elevation, raising elevation of the pier that's out there. Again, the gangway connection as part of that phase one effort, this is a modifiable, so there will raise the elevation of the pier as part of this proposed, raise the elevation of the gangway tie-in as part of these proposed alternatives. That was just a consideration thought of in that phase one approach because we knew this phase two approach, this phase two work was being performed. Along with that, we kind of had to draw a line in the sand. As we started developing out these alternatives, we realized that backland, the more we developed out the alternatives, the more we were adding more and more, and we just needed to draw a line in the sand. So all of our scope is limited to the existing footprint of the solid fill pier and then the timber pier itself. So that's kind of where we stopped our project and said, if we want to do more, we can, but as of right now, we're just going to stop right here. So as part of, along with the proposed alternatives, the consideration of the material we're going to replace the structure with. So as I said earlier, the rock socketed piles will be required to resist lateral and uplift design forces. So the pier structure is going to sit on those rock socketed piles, and then everything up from there, we analyzed a steel alternative and a timber alternative for, and the difference is material properties, the longevity of the structure, maintenance, and costs. And as you can see, steel for us looks like a preferred alternative. The materials allow it to span longer, so we'll have less piles. The material itself lasts longer, so the service life is significantly longer. And because of that, the maintenance is less frequent. And because of that span, less piles are required, which lower the capital costs, and the longevity lowers the maintenance costs. So now the fun part. So the proposed alternatives that we designed, we have four main alternatives. The first alternative is maintaining that existing footprint of where the solid fill pier is, the timber pier, and just getting it up from that backland area to elevation 19 as on that ADA slope, that 5% up to elevation 19 and keeping it all in the same footprint. Alternative 2 has a similar approach, except it extended an additional 38 feet up to that elevation 19 mean lower water. And then alternative 3, we maintain the pier because of the work that was done in phase 1, but we relocate the rotunda up out of the water and onto the land. And then alternative 4, this is something that we worked together with the town and decided that maybe we don't want to go up, raise from that elevation 14 to elevation 19. So we'll take like a phased approach. So we decided raising the timber structure to elevation 17 as quickly as possible on that 5% slope. And then as a phase 2, given 25 or 30 years when we decide that the pier should be raised, we'll raise that solid fill section and the timber section, the pier section to elevation 19 and to match that alternative 1 footprint. So like I said earlier, both timber and steel framing were evaluated, and all of the steel alternatives will have a timber facade. So it'll look exactly like the timber structure on top that's already out there. So this is alternative 1, it's in the exact same footprint. So from the aerial, it'll look the same, but the sections are kind of where you see the difference. Just as a note here, earlier I was talking about the difference between timber and steel. The timber alternative has significantly more piles, and I think that side-by-side section really shows the difference between the timber alternative and the steel alternative, and that comes down to the span of each material. Yeah, I guess I'll get into each one. For alternative 1, we have that solid fill ramp that ties into the backlands and works its way up 3.5 feet. That'll have like the same stone facade on either side, and then tie into the timber, now timber, future steel pile supported pier up to that elevation 19 and have roughly a 55-foot pier that is at that elevation 19. So the slope is at 5% ADA, and we reach that elevation 19 as quickly as we can to extend the service life and deal with the FEMA flood elevations and sea level rise. So that is alternative 1. Then alternative 2, there's a difference here with the extension. The solid fill pier will remain in the same footprint, similar to alternative 1, but the pier section will be extended that 38 feet. Oops. And there we go. Same noticeable pile count here too. Just even more exaggerated with the extension of the pier. So this is the exact same approachway. It's about 100-foot slope, 5% slope up to elevation 19, but instead of that 55-foot deck length, we have an additional 40 feet extended at the end here. So similar, but just extended a bit further. And then alternative 3, this is the alternative where we're raising the pier. We're actually proposing a framed observant deck. We can put like seating out there, or maybe put a cover on it so it has a similar aesthetic to the rotunda, but the rotunda has been moved out of the water and onto land. So it'll sit on a concrete foundation with a pathway sloped up, grading on either side just to tie into the existing grassland that's already at the site. Keep doing that. And this is, again, similar. They're all relatively similar to that alternative 1, where we have the 100-foot ramp up at a 1-on-20. The solid fill gets raised up about from 0 to 3.5 feet, and we then tie in to the rest of the pier at elevation 19. So you have a 33-foot platform, a bit longer with the steel because of that span length. So 37-foot platform, but still very similar to that alternative 1. And then alternative 4, we're showing that phased approach. So the footprint will be the same as alternative 1, except we'll be raising at different elevations. So I think the sections kind of show it a bit better. So if the going from elevation 14 to elevation 19 seems too dramatic, we can go with this alternative that brings us from elevation 14 to elevation 17, which allows for us to deal with the overtopping and the flooding that we're seeing now while slowly increasing the elevation of the pier instead of doing one massive overhaul. And then as time goes on, we projected a 25-year increase, an increase of 2 feet in like around 25 years, matching that phase, the alternative one, where we have a solid fill ramp on top of the existing solid fill that ties into the pier, and the pier slopes up all at ADA, that 100-foot ramp then ties into the pier and the rotunda. And we also want to note that the gangway for all these alternatives has been, the phase 1 gangway is tied into all of these alternatives. So here's a little summary of the design alternatives. As you can see, the big difference here is kind of the cost. So like I said earlier, all of the alternatives were broken out between steel framing and timber framing. They'll all be on those steel piles, the rock socketed steel piles like we saw in what is out there now for phase 1. So we're looking at alternative 1, which is staying in the existing footprint, 2.25 for steel, and alternative, I'll just go through the steel. They're all lower than the timber, but if we decide to go with the timber, we have all those options as well. Alternative 1 is 2.25 with a 40-foot extension. We're looking at around 2.5 million. Alternative 3 is moving the rotunda upland. This is the cheapest alternative, most cost-effective alternative at 1.75 million. And alternative 4, we had to break out and show that phase 1 being around 2.16 million. And then when we want to go back and escalate raise the pier up to elevation 19, all staying within the same footprint, we escalated the cost 25 years out for that 2.5-foot raise, but with mobilization and all the construction materials included with inflation as well, that alternative for phase 2 will be around 3.5 million to get somebody out there to do the work again and raise the pier up. Oops. And this is where I hand it off to Christine to go over potential funding.
Yeah, I think it's important just to briefly present this overview of grant funding opportunities that are highly likely to be in support of the next phase of this project. I think many of you are familiar with the Mass Seaport Economic Council and the opportunities that they afford for waterfront infrastructure projects. Phase 1 was funded for the dock system through the Seaport Advisory Council, and I believe they provided, and Bayan, correct me if I'm wrong, around $800,000 towards phase 1, is that correct?
Yes.
Not to put you on the spot, is he still there?
Yeah, hi, Christine. It was $811 million that we got from the state,
Okay.
Seaport Economic Council.
Yep, so they've invested in phase 1, and they're also providing 80% of the costs towards phase 2 engineering, permitting, and design. So right now, the Seaport Economic Council is heavily invested in this project, phase 1, phase 2, and there is a high likelihood, traditionally, the council continues to invest in projects that move forward in a phased approach like this. So that opportunity is there to assist the town with funding the construction phase up to $1 million, and the town would be required to provide a 20% match. The funding request cycle with that program typically is twice a year in May and November. So that opportunity exists and certainly should be on the table to consider moving forward into a construction phase for phase 2. Secondly, through the Office of Coastal Zone Management, there are annual resiliency grants that are issued. They provide up to $2 million in funding assistance with a 25% town match. That is an optional match, but it is highly recommended to be competitive with your ask. And this program targets projects very similar to the project that we're looking at here in Tux, in that it is all about supporting infrastructure, replacement, reconstruction efforts that are focused on addressing long-term resiliency and sustainability. And that's exactly what all of these alternatives ultimately are being designed to achieve over the long term. So again, the scope of this project fits very nicely with the scope that the Resiliency Grant Program does support funding. And that request is an annual request. Typically, the opportunities come out in May. Actually, we're in one right now, and proposals are accepted, I think, until early July. So it's right around this time that those applications would be filed, and that's a once-a-year opportunity. And I do believe that both programs could concurrently fund this project to further help defer town costs and town investment, moving this project forward. And without getting into heavy math, because we've got several alternatives on the table here and not really a final decision on which way we're going, we just thought it would be important to share with you folks tonight that there are very strong potential opportunities out there for the state, provided they have funding available, to support a project just like Tux. It's a highly favorable type of project that both of these programs are like to fund and have traditionally funded, as I mentioned, with the investments that they've made to date on Tux Point. And not to also be remiss, but they are funding Morristown Pier work, Seaport Council is, and recently, Bion, we got funds to support Reed Park work. So Seaport is heavily investing in the town of Manchester's waterfront development, for sure. And I think, Ben, is that the last slide?
Yeah. That brings us to questions from all of you.
Questions?
John, yes.
Yeah, a couple of questions, and thank you, Ben and Christine. The graphics are very good and very, very helpful, and the numbers are even more so. We're going up to mean low water of 19 feet, correct? And one of these scenarios is 17 feet. For the pier, what is it right now?
Right around 14
All right.
mean low water.
So we're going up 5 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any benefit to moving that rotunda out? The costs were very, very similar. Essentially, you're adding, 38 feet of pier. Is there any advantage in doing so? Because the cost differential is not significant.
Well, I'll take a stab at that. So we looked at this alternative, and I do want to just qualify that our cost estimates are very rough order of magnitude. This is conceptual alternative level, really just to get perspective and general order of magnitudes of cost. The town had requested that we look at an alternative like this with the possibility of perhaps saving a little bit more money than our cost estimates show now, because it's so early phase. But the idea would be to extend the pier further seaward to allow for, in very simple terms, to pick up the rotunda and put it on the extended platform, as opposed to have to temporarily relocate that structure. It really was the thought process of moving that rotunda fairly simply by constructing the new platform and then just moving it seaward and then continuing on with the construction of the pier. So we do need to invest a little bit more deeply should this be an alternative that the town is interested in pursuing as a preferred alternative, to see just what types of cost savings would be associated with this element. And certainly, extending it does give more level pier access out here. It also will allow for, and we're not showing it here because we were really squished into thinning cross sections on these slides. But big picture wise, I don't know if you folks recall off the top of your head, and Ben, I don't know if we have a slide that we can quickly show, is when we were doing phase one of the project, there was discussion and consideration of those floats extending in front of the rotunda. So really, there's a little bit more potential to this project that I think this alternative would lend itself well to. And Brian, I see you ready to chime in, so I'm happy to hear your comments on this.
Well, you pretty much covered it. When it was first proposed, this idea to me, immediately I thought, well, if you could save by not having to store the rotunda somewhere else, that's good. And it accomplishes more of what the rotunda was built for in the first place, to get a view out the harbor. So it benefits the town from a...
It's also historically more correct.
Yes, correct. Yep. So that's really it. You got it, Christine.
Okay.
Okay. Becky.
With this option of alternative 2, just seems to expose it a little bit more, but how close does that come to the channel going out 38 feet?
We do have, can you go back to the slide that shows the floats as well? I think we show the offset. Oops. Yeah. So
51 feet.
yeah.
Just right.
And I believe, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, that float extension, I believe we had a 25-foot offset from the channel.
Yes.
Yep, and that's something that we've carried into the phase 1 floats that are out there now. There's a 25-foot offset, so that would just continue to be maintained. So there really isn't any true encroachment into the channel because the floats are that limiting buffer to vessel encroachment near the channel.
Correct.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, you've got a question from the
Oh, right.
audience, but if you
Yes.
do the board first.
Kathy?
If we were to apply for and/or receive any of the proposed grants, would that reduce the likelihood that we could obtain similar grants for other sea level rise projects we may have to pursue?
So obviously I can't speak on behalf of those that decide what projects get funded, but I think it really comes down to, managing your projects. I think what we see right now is Seaport is funding several projects in the harbor concurrently. We've got this project, we've got Morristown Pier, and we've got Reed Park is about to start up. So I think you can see there that the investment is being made, and they're concurrently happening projects. I think that both of these opportunities, as well as many state funding opportunities that we're seeing to support these kind of projects, are very much inclined to support projects that are addressing long-term sustainability and resiliency along our waterfront. That is something that we are being charged with more than ever as waterfront engineers. And these programs are very much focused on finding those types of projects to really profile and show more from a transferability to other communities that yes, you can move forward with improvements along your waterfront and you can solve these long-term sustainability and resiliency issues that we are all heavily engaged in trying to find solutions for. Understanding that, the sea level rise and climate change that we are seeing, they're based on, predictions and, practical approaches. We've been seeing a lot of these projects throughout the state where the infrastructure is so old that you just can't repair it anymore. So we're seeing more and more throughout the state of Massachusetts that there is opportunity for these state programs to really make a difference in local communities, to really replace the infrastructure because it's no longer sustainable because it's old, but replace the infrastructure with mindful and thoughtful approaches that will achieve these long-term sustainability and resiliency needs, to make sure that the investment is getting all of these communities where they need to be over the long term, understanding the challenges along the waterfront, meaning that sea level rise isn't something that happens tomorrow, but it's something that is ever changing over time. And we're working very diligently to find creative situations in our engineering projects right now to allow communities to move forward in a practical approach, an affordable approach to achieve these long-term resiliency needs along the waterfront.
John?
Yeah, final question from me. The 19 feet that you're going up 5 feet, is that your number or a number from IPCC or a number from the Army Corps of Engineer? Where'd that number come from?
So Ben, if you can go back to the existing section, I think it's easier to explain, hopefully in very quick fashion. There you go. Whoop. So right now the pier deck elevation is at approximately 14, and you can see that FEMA flood elevation is at 16.8. As far as FEMA flood elevations go, it's preferable that we raise the deck elevation a minimum of 2 feet above that elevation. And that's where we kind of start with that 19, right? 16.8 plus 2 brings you to 19. Concurrent to the flood zone, 2 feet above base flood elevation, meaning the deck, there's the sea level projections, which we are utilizing the intermediate scenarios that NOAA has recently republished based on Boston Harbor data. And over the lifespan of the new infrastructure, which at a minimum would take us out 50 years, so say 2070, but because if the town does choose, and we recommend strongly to move forward with a steel framed structure because of its longevity, and that could actually last longer than 50 years. By the true duration and sustainability of the steel structure alternative, the sea level rise projections could have you up to 5 feet increase over that duration of almost up to 105 years. So we add that 5 feet to 14 and we get back at 19. So we're looking at both FEMA flood elevation practices, and then we're looking also at the sea level rise projection over time based on NOAA published data.
Any other questions from the board?
Not at this point from me.
Chuck Houghton has a hand up.
Please unmute yourself and.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, okay, thank you, sorry. I had some comments on some of the different options. Is this the time to be doing that?
Before you start, please identify yourself and.
Sorry, Chuck Houghton, Oxcaster Road. In town here. I have some comments on some of the different options. Is that this is the time to do that right now?
Please try and be brief, but yes.
Sure. So my family spends a lot of time at Tux Point, so we have kind of strong opinions on how to keep Tux Point the way it is. So I had some thoughts on some of the options. It was a very nice presentation. It was very, very good, showing the different options. I think moving the rotunda on land makes no sense at all to me. I'm just going to leave that at that. Moving the rotunda further out, I don't think is that good of an idea. One of the things that we talked about when they were putting the docks in was to get more room between the docks and the rotunda. So right now there's about 40 feet, and I think we're going to lose most of that if it gets moved out. I don't know if I could share my screen for a second to show a cartoon. Is that possible or not?
I think that would be awkward.
Okay, all right. So right now, a lot of people bring their boats in, and there's plenty of room to get into that inner dock, and that's going to be really constricted if we move the rotunda out, especially if someone ties up to the end of the dock between the rotunda and the dock. That's going to cause a lot of problems. number 4, the last one, to me, looked very attractive, raising it up 2.5 feet and keeping the rotunda where it is. Preserves where the rotunda is, it leaves plenty of room for getting the boats inside, and the design starts with a much slower slope than with the higher height, and it also gives the ability to reassess the height at a later date if we want to go higher or lower, depending on how the actual sea level rise, correlates with what the predictions were. So that's my
Thank you.
2 cents.
Thank you very much. Chris?
So Chris Holly, 10 Old Neck Road. I don't know whether we should just dismiss putting it on land out of hand. I don't know why it was built out there to begin with. Most rotundas are on land to begin with. It's not-
Can I interrupt and tell you why?
Sure.
The Charter House used to be approximately where they're talking about putting the rotunda. And then the yacht club built their building, and you couldn't see the ocean anymore from the Charter House. And the town moved the Charter House to its current location and built the rotunda out much further than it currently goes, so that the town people, and not just the yacht club, got a view of the harbor and the sand and town.
So where they would talk about relocating the rotunda would give you plenty of view of the harbor, and you could always walk out on the dock if you wanted to see the wide open ocean. From just a totally practical point of view, doesn't it make sense to put the darn thing on land so we don't have to worry about it anymore? It's going to look very different with steel piles and up, 5 feet higher. It's not going to be the way we remember it or the way it looks now. So I just think we should think about this more carefully than just.
I think you haven't heard anyone dismissing anything yet.
Not from the board.
Not from the board,
but
but yes, okay. Thank you. Are there any further comments? I assume we will be revisiting this.
So another hand up.
I did have a comment.
Carly has her hand up.
And it's more a question, and that would be, is it possible to do a survey? Have, put it out with cost or estimated costs so that people understand costs involved or estimated costs and what do they?
Personally, I think I'd like to see a little more detail.
Yes.
And a little more public outreach before we do a survey.
Yeah, makes sense.
I agree with that. My only comment would be that when we get further along in the process, in addition to the grants, I'm wondering if we can put some of our committees to work here. The rotunda is important for, cultural, historical reasons, I don't know whether or not community preservation.
Yes, community preservation has approached me to say that this is a project. One of the reasons that they would like to increase their percentage, but yes.
But I think my comment is, I think we could put our committees to work to maybe flesh out some of the details if possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, good old fashioned fundraising.
Yep.
I would like to
Yeah.
see us use that for at least a portion of the cost, rather than relying on taxation as a first bucket we go to.
I agree.
Greg, you said Carly?
She put her hand down.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Identify yourself and give us your address, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. 1 Masconomo Street, and I think you maybe answered my question. There's going to be some more diligence done before a final decision is made about, which option we go with, perhaps. At the end of the day, I guess, who's left to make the decision? Is it the voters or is it the select board?
I think we would not put forward 4 choices to the voters. But certainly a project of this size has to go in front of town meeting because it requires, even if we do very successful fundraising and very successful grant raising, there is significant town funds that will need to be expended. So yes, the voters will get to say, but no, we're not going to do this at a fine granularity at town meeting.
What was Carly's last name?
Well, I guess regardless, something needs to be done and it's going to involve a cost. So if it's for anything, I would prefer not to see it on land. And if it involved me having to go out and help fundraise for the town, I'd be happy to do that. I'm sure there's a lot of people in town that would be willing to do so.
Thank you.
Could we just ask for her last name on the, I mean, we got the first name, but not the full name.
You want my last name's Cook.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just for the minutes, that way the person who
No problem.
transcribes the minutes
No.
has the information.
That's not a problem. Thank you.
Karen, is your hand up?
It is.
Excellent.
Karen Bennett, 28 Lincoln. Do we have to build to a 100-year storm requirement to qualify for the grants? Does anyone know?
Yes.
So it's a 100-year requirement?
100 years, the current standard for most, though, that is changing. Some agencies are going to the 500-year storm. So it's a little bit in flux right now.
And I would just add that the current grant structure does not mandate that. So that right now that is still a flexible component of the grant applications for both the Seaport Economic Council and CZM Coastal Resiliency grants.
So Chuck Wiesner has his hand up.
Okay.
Hi, Chuck Wisner, 16 Highland Avenue. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. When I first heard about this, I had a visual trigger about it would have to be in the water. And then I spent a fair amount of time out there imagining what it would look like to move it out, getting close to the waterways and raising it up. And then I went back and stood on the knoll, and I was quite surprised to find that the east end of the island of Baker's Island is still visible, and so is a fair amount of the bay. So I would suggest that for the engineers or the planners, that can we see the location of the rotunda in context with the chowder house? Because depending on the orientation, the chowder house faces one way, so that the rotunda wouldn't block a view of the chowder house. And then also, I think just some visuals that would help people appreciate how it would feel to be on land with the rotunda. And then my question I have is, if this is going to go ahead, does it make sense before the decision is made, or can we apply for a grant before the decision is made, or do we have to have all the decisions made? Thank you.
I can answer the last question. So right now, there is approved grant funding through the Seaport Economic Council for the engineering, permitting, final design and bid phase component of this project to get it into construction. So there's already money that's been awarded to the town through Seaport Economic Council. There is no current monies being appropriated through the Coastal Resiliency Grant program at this time. But there already is Seaport money invested in this phase of the project, which again will take this project out to bid. And the idea would be at that time, or in sequence when the planning efforts are confirming when construction will happen, target going after additional Seaport grant money for the construction phase, if that makes sense.
Okay, and of the amount, the steel framing costs 2.5 or 1.75. What is the current funding?
So there's no current funding in place for construction. This is all being funded to do the initial evaluations, conceptual alternatives, to select an alternative to advance into permitting, and then a final design and public bid phase.
Okay.
So there's no construction money that's been appropriated because a preferred alternative has not been yet selected. So this is really the first step out of the gate to prepare these conceptual alternatives for the town's consideration so that a decision can be made on the next step forward. And that's really where we're at right now.
So at what phase can you apply for the grant?
It would be for construction funding.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So I'll jump in and kind of frame how I envision kind of the next steps that we take forward. We certainly want to solicit as much public opinion and feedback as possible. So I'm thinking we do a public forum strictly for this project and advertise it through our committees and on all of our social. Probably looking at sometime in mid-July. But I think it would be helpful to have, if we want to, feedback from the select board of if there are any alternatives we would not want to bring forward or identify the alternatives that we would want to focus on, I think would help, kind of steer the conversation into a more productive, venue. So that's kind of where I see, kind of the next steps to progress this project so we can get to, an alternative that we are going to move forward into design and then we can take forward to the permitting agencies, because we can kind of concurrently, once we have those alternatives and we're working on the permitting and we know our path, that's when we can really start to apply for all of these grants.
Exactly.
Thank you, Nate.
Sandy Rogers, is your hand up?
Yes, Sandy.
Hi, thanks. Sandy Rogers, 82 Old Essex Road. I have a question in that if we move the rotunda up, which we need to do for rising tides, we're going to have a lot of low tides that we have a lot more exposure, especially underneath the rotunda. And I was curious if there were any tactics to protect the underneath of the rotunda. We don't want, obviously people getting hurt, but, people could go under there a lot, could cause some damage. I didn't know if that was a design element that you were looking at, because we'll be looking at this up high with a lot of the low tides and people will go wandering around there.
So one of the benefits with going with the steel framing is that we can reduce the number of piles quite dramatically. So in terms of things that people could I think Ben's pulling up the section here. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, you can see how, on the top, we would, if we use timber framing, we would have 21 piles. Versus if we went with the steel framing, we would only have 9 piles. So, that is one way we can reduce, it'd be less than what is existing out there right now.
Yeah, if you zoom in, you can see all the shaded, really light line work. Those are all your existing piles now. So you can really see kind of the web of piles. They're very tightly spaced compared to what this particular alternative is really limiting the number of piles that you would see. So there's a significant difference.
Madam Chair, in order to move things along, because I think we're getting into a lot of detail that is going to get at the public forum. Nate has a very specific question, which I wonder if we can answer that and then close discussion. And the question was, would we want to eliminate any options for that public outreach? And
I had a comment on Nate's comment, which is I think that July is very optimistic, given the amount of public education we need to do before we even have a forum, the need for diagrams that are more illustrative of the views. So I think we are not going to look at a July timeframe for a forum. And I think you're right, we are getting into details that the construction of the understructure of it is really beyond. I think we have a great deal of information. The information is going out. It's on the website. People can look at it and we can think about it. And I don't know whether it would be, probably the 17th of July would be a good time for us to come back. Bring it to those of us who are liaisons, bring it to our committees and say, look, you should look at these plans and think about what this means. And unless there is someone in the audience or someone here who has a new suggestion, I suggest that we close down this discussion.
Can we have just the package itself be emailed?
Yep.
Thank you.
So that we can take an action to follow up at our July
July
17th meeting.
Yes.
Great idea.
And I don't think we should be cutting down at this point.
Having heard an argument for each
Yep.
of the alternatives, I think you're right.
Yep.
Okay.
Wow, that was good though.
Very good. Very
Thank you
informative.
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent presentation.
Informative.
Excellent, and excellent follow-up on all of the questions. We've got a lot of information to deal with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Muffin, did you have a comment? No. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the Water Resource Protection Task Force update.
Let's see, I can cover that. Dave, are you here for, oh, here we are.
Alive and well.
There he is.
Captain okay?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can, Steve.
We hear you, we see you.
Yeah, I see several of me. Whatever that's worth. Doesn't make me twice as handsome. No, not at all. Well, thank you for allowing us time. We are happy to say that we are on schedule to complete the task force work in the 18 months that you gave us to do this work. We ended up, I think, covering more ground than we expected, and that you may see that reflected in the length of our final report, which a draft of which you have tonight. And of course, I don't intend to go through much of that or to have you expect that you have questions about it because you only received it today. And in fact, we're going to have the last meeting of our task. Sorry? The last meeting of our task force approved the full report. They've already approved the executive summary. It's really the executive summary that I'd like to focus on tonight in order to highlight the recommendations that we think are most urgent and worth your considering tonight or at your next meeting. So if I can share a screen, which is not currently possible.
Yep, we're on.
You want to make me a co-host or liberate the screen share?
Yep, I was looking for your name, but you're under Manchester 1, so let me.
I can fix that.
Okay, you should be good.
Okay. Right, thank you. Here we go. So we came up with 11 key recommendations, and I want to highlight 4 of them tonight, which the task force regards as worthy of enacting right away. The first is to designate who's going to carry the responsibility for pursuing ongoing work with some of the recommendations, particularly the ones related to the effort to make people more engaged and more likely to conserve drinking water. And that's number one. And as I have understood from our conversations, your inclination is to delegate this to the Sustainability Committee, which presently has, I think, 3 open seats, maybe 2. And we recommend designating 3 people, one to have a focus on the conservation efforts as an analytic tool on the water meters as well, and 2 to have, second person to have an outward focus on conservation and education and communication, and the third person to provide liaison with you folks and other parts of town government. So that's number one. Number 2 is to change the water rates to encourage conservation. We've been through these, I think, in some detail, but you may still have some questions. What you see on your screen at the bottom here is a summary of what we're proposing for your consideration right now, which is to reduce the number of tiers from 6 to 4, to reduce the rate in Tier 1, which covers more than half, will cover more than half of the households and commercial businesses in town, to change slightly the rate and the definition of Tier 2, a new Tier 3 that will be roughly twice as expensive per unit, and Tier 4 also a little bit more than twice as expensive. You also asked us to get ready a communication, a letter to go out to people who are likely
Steve,
possible.
if I may interrupt you for just a moment, on the tiers, when you distributed a list of the people in Tier 4, who would be in Tier 4, many of the multifamily dwellings in town were falling into Tier 4. Not because they were using excessive water, but because they were multiple units on a single meter. What is does the task force have a way of dealing with this?
We certainly do in this stage of notifying them, which is we can flag them, and we flagged, I think, 30 or 35 multi-unit on a single meter in that group of 440. I don't think very many of them were in Tier 4, but you could be right. In any event, we would simply divide by the number of units their historical use in order, and as you're saying, in almost every case, that would take them out of the group of roughly 400 residences and businesses that we've identified. So they would not get this communication. But beyond that, it's an important shift in the billing structure that we've recommended to the Water Division, that particularly as you change the tiers, that the designation of tiers in a multifamily, multi-unit property be defined by the per unit usage and not by the total property usage.
So is that something that the task force will do? Is that something that the DPW needs to do?
It's either the DPW or a software supplier, bill provider. I don't actually know the mechanics of how those bills get generated. Maybe Nate or Chuck, if you're online.
I would think it's something we can work into the billing, that when we have the account, we know we can divide that number by, X and come up with the individual units. I think we would just want some way of verifying the number of units at, per each address. And, I think that's something that we could certainly work out as we move forward.
Yeah, we volunteer to do some of the lifting on that with the assessor or anybody else we need to get it confirmed by. But as I said, we've already checkmarked what we think are 30 to 35 multi-unit users that are on a single meter in that top list. So yeah, it's very much worth getting that right, I think. Otherwise, we'll be aiming the conservation efforts very much in the wrong place. Other questions before I plunge ahead here? Okay, thank you. This third recommendation to increase awareness and education about conservation is also, we think, urgent. And there are lots of opportunities here, partly because of the rather large amount of water that we've used historically, and what we perceived as a pretty good response to voluntary water restrictions last year. So that says there is an opportunity for people to learn more about how they might, particularly the heavy users, how they might change their irrigation practices, how they might change their landscaping, and finally, how they might source their own irrigation water. And we'll see, it's not, as you know, it's not a large number. 440 is a generous kind of allowing for a lot of, say 400 without the multi-units. It's really about 100 almost entirely residential properties that are using very large amounts of drinking water for irrigation in the summer. And I expect some of them will be very receptive, others not at all receptive, and there'll be some mixture of response to the changes in price and response to the offers of ways they can improve. But one way or another, we're going to try to put all that in front of all of those users and not neglect the rest of the town, although the opportunities for conservation, I think, are down the road a bit with the majority of households. But in any event, that's an area where we can do work and, in fact, spend some of our budget in whatever format we are continuing this. And the fourth area we recommend taking immediate action, it falls under the heading of accelerating the replacement and upgrade of the infrastructure. And it is focused on the new water meters. We are virtually ready to launch a pilot comparing two vendors head to head, thanks to the good work of Nate and Chuck lining these guys up. They have variations on the same technology, which is the advanced digital meter, that fewer moving parts, less vulnerable to the contaminants that we have in our water. And they offer almost real-time information over a smartphone app to the users. So part of the pilot test will be to determine do people actually use those apps and do they find them easy or difficult, useful or useless. We designed this as a 6-month pilot test, and in fact, if you've read the draft we created for notifying the top 400 users, it actually starts out with an offer to join us as test pilots, and then points out that this might be particularly important to them because they are among the large users. So that would be the fourth area. You can see those somewhat summarized here in the highlighted areas. Sorry, there is actually a fifth. We'd recommend beginning the work to look at the options for a third primary source of water. Not that we need it today, but Manchester has a spectacular legacy of planning far ahead in terms of providing water supply, clean and reliable. And we think to continue that legacy, right now is the time to start examining through geology and some test wells the opportunity for another source that makes sense in terms of the location of our infrastructure. So none of these things has a large price tag attached to them. We have a small $30,000, I think, allocation in the coming fiscal year, and we have about twice that in unspent funds from our 18 months of work, and we propose to employ that net amount, which is probably around $75,000 when the dust settles, to accomplish these things, with a particular emphasis on those 4 or 5 we think are urgent. let me stop there. There's, as you know, there's pages of detailed findings behind these recommendations and the summary of findings. And if you like, I'm happy to plunge into those, but I also just appreciate your feedback on this particular selection of priorities.
Thank you. John?
Well, I don't want to preach to the choir or anything. I've as part of the Water Task Force, I'm aware of all of these findings, and I heartily recommend the ones that Steve has indicated as being the ones that which we should focus on immediately, and we're prepared to do so. And I think that we can start to make a difference in water use right off the bat here. And furthermore, start to make some progress with regard to water in our future. So
Are those the ones highlighted in yellow?
it's 1, 2. Steve really, yes, they are, but it's 1, 2, 3, and 5. So they're in yellow, but not entirely. There's some other things in there.
It says 11.
Excuse me,
The
in
other one
11.
is,
1, 2,
the
3, and
meters.
11.
Yeah, the other one is the meter. So it's exploratory new sources, the 3 conservation,
Right.
2 conservation areas, convening the new function of the Sustainability Committee. And we think there's room for a little subsidy to the pilot test, because it turns out that some of the heavy users, as Nate and Chuck have informed us, probably have slightly more complicated setups for their feeder lines and current meters. So it may require a little bit more expenditure to get a test meter on their lines, but it's very important to have a spectrum of users, from the heavy users to the real people who are already, conservators, let's call them, light users.
I will add to that one thing that Chuck and Nate in particular are interested in is these new meters provide an element of automation and through apps, etc., where you can really take a look at that, and the user-friendly interface there is something they're interested in getting feedback on as well. So,
If I may go back one step. Greg, what is involved in transferring money that has been allocated for the Water Resource Protection Task Force to other purposes?
Well, if you want it unrelated to water, you have to go back to the flows into fund balance, and it's reallocated by another vote. If you feel it's a continuation of the work of the task force, but under a different group, then I don't think there's a problem continuing on with that.
Okay.
So it wasn't, it's really the purposes of the task force that the money's assigned to, not. So
Not specific.
Yeah,
not the task force itself.
right, if there's a new iteration of who the task force is, that's okay, as long as it's still being used for similar purposes.
Okay, so education, for example, or.
Yeah, the conservation,
or
education, yes.
Supporting the meter test. Okay.
Yeah,
Just,
that would be fine.
good.
Can I just?
Yes, of course.
I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody involved in this group. What a huge lift. I mean, reading through everything that I've had so far, it's just amazing work and very timely.
I'm going to second that. It really restored my faith in the idea of citizen volunteers who bring energy, but they also bring considerable expertise in terms of engineers like John Round, and lawyers like Mike Carvalho, and biologists like Lynn Atkinson, data scientists like Gordon Turner. We were just we're very grateful.
But the most kudos
Also-
should really go to Steve
Yeah.
as the leader of the group. He's been very, he's been on top of all of these issues and has really helped to educate all of us on the task force in terms of
Thank
what
you.
we should be looking
Thank you,
at.
Mike.
Well, we're
My wife
fortunate
will be
for
gratified.
everybody.
My wife will be glad if I don't mention drinking water for the next 6 months. We should also have another shout out. You can't have enough of these to Chuck Dam and Nate DeRozier. As we have an exceptional management and leadership team there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just a thank you again. I agree, the work, this is an exceptionally thorough and informative final report, so I'm very thankful for that. One quick little piece of feedback on the proposed letter that is proposed to be sent to the heaviest users of drinking water. I'd ask you to think about resequencing some of the things in your message. You're kind of burying the lead, so to speak.
Yes.
You know, if you're going to get my attention, starting out with the fact that, hey, you know, you're likely to see an increase in your water bill, but we're here to help, right? As opposed to not mentioning the increase in the water bill until like the second or third paragraph. So just, I would suggest make sure you get their attention,
I'll do it.
because I think it's a really important letter.
Okay, yeah, so you didn't like the kind of easing in, soft pedaling approach. I understand.
In the summer, people might, you know, not read the whole thing, and the most important part is we don't want them to miss out on an opportunity on something that could really save them a lot of money.
What's the adage? Next best thing to good news is bad news fast.
Yeah.
Well put. And Kathy, there's one thing I have to show you because I know other people may appreciate it, but you in particular will if I can get it to.
Is it a timeline?
Must be.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So this is not by any means complete, but it's the template for what we're going to use. Get it to appear on the screen here. And it's just a work plan and timetable in fairly standard terms.
Thank you, Steve.
But it's the way we're going to keep these trains.
You can send it to me offline. You can send it to us offline.
Yeah. So there it is.
Oh, beautiful.
Each major task is broken down into subtasks. They'll be assigned to different timetables. Wow. These are placeholders right now. But the first step of implementation is to make this thing right and start managing by it.
And so then this oversight would be turned over to DPW or sustainability for certain pieces, Greg?
Ideally, we'd have somebody on the sustainability committee who feels ready that she or he can.
That was my only other comment, is just making sure that the recommendations have clear owners, so we know who's following up on what, and I think that's maybe more in Greg's.
Yeah, that's this suspiciously empty column right now called assigned to.
Potentially more.
It should all be there.
Right. Sustainability.
Right.
So it's,
Thank you. That was it.
Other questions from the board? Questions from anyone else?
Well, just question or comment. So the process now, we have water rates that are proposed.
Mm-hmm.
And we got this letter, and this letter will go out in the next, say, week or two. And then we vote on July 6th. And, I suppose we could get some feedback on the letter by that time if there are some people say, oh, what's going on? Although I don't think it's all that shocking, but that is the sequence of events here.
Yep, that's it.
Yes.
Dave.
Jeff Coshan, 15 Vine Street.
Excuse me, Jeff.
What about the meter pilot program? What about the schedule of that? That's immediate also. I don't know how it implements itself. I think maybe just give approval to Chuck Dam to proceed. Maybe we need to assign some of that money to that cost.
Is Chuck on there?
Or just a question for Greg. What is it that the select board needs to approve tonight, if anything?
Well, if you want the new metering program to get underway sooner rather than later, you could approve dollars for that.
Which we have in those remaining funds. We could help with that.
Do you have an amount?
The amount, yeah.
You have the total. But if we are going to authorize something for the meters,
Yeah,
I think they said, what was the
So it's
deal?
really good.
10,000.
May.
It's really going to be dependent on the number of large users that we get. That's where the big cost comes in with the larger meter. Like, so the program and scope that we had gotten from the two meter companies included 10 5/8 inch meters, and it was a total cost of, I think, between $2,000 and $3,000. But a single 1.5 inch meter, which many of the larger users have, or even larger, they might have like a 2-inch meter. I think the 1.5 inch meter was like $815 for a single one. So if we do get multiple of these larger users, that's really where I think we would need the additional funds to just kind of cover that gap of, where we thought the $2,000 to $3,000 range that we thought these were going to be in versus, potentially a little bit more than that, if that helps. So it's really, once we have the list of users, we can, identify what specific meters we'll need, and then we can have a cost.
Can we agree that we are going to start the program, and then find out how much of the funds we need to transfer? Is there some way to get things started without having the cash in hand?
Well, we have the cash, it's just a question of.
It hasn't been allocated.
Do you need us to take a vote on a not to exceed number in order to get things moving?
I'm
think
comfortable
so.
with you.
The money's there.
I'm comfortable with you taking a vote to authorize proceeding with a pilot program for new meters. And we will come back to you with financing
all right.
details as needed.
In discussions with Chuck, he had the money, he wasn't worried about
Correct.
appropriations, he just spent the money because it's not very
Sounds
much.
good.
And except for what Nate has just
So
mentioned.
I move to start the pilot water meter program using available funds from DPW.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Brian?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to do now?
So the only other thing is, are you on board with proceeding with the rates as proposed? Or do you want another variation? Is what is proposed, are you comfortable with that proceeding with your rate hearing? That's.
Personally, I am comfortable as long as someone goes to the assessors or whoever and finds all of the places where it's multifamily. I don't want to give a
Exactly, yeah.
punitive rate to multifamily housing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would just as soon wait and vote on it at our next meeting.
Yeah.
Not asking for a change in numbers, but asking for progress on making sure that the rates are applied to the people who should look at conservation.
I also have, Nate, have you and Chuck weighed in on the rates, the proposed rates?
Yeah, we reviewed it, and I think we're generally in agreement. We certainly need to raise revenue with the amount of capital that we have in the coming years, and this is certainly a good step forward in doing that.
Thank you.
Jeff Koshan, 15 Vine Street. The rate structures that we went through there, they were the culmination of a heck of a lot of work and proven in other communities, including in Massachusetts. So I think those are pretty solid. That's a pretty solid structure, proven in some ways.
Yeah. So certainly for the first step, first phase, for sure.
And I'll add that the FinCom tonight just expressed approval in a informal, around the table response to seeing those proposed rates.
So Greg, do you need us to take a formal vote to bring these rates forward to the meeting, or we don't vote on anything tonight and just vote on July 6th?
Yeah, I'm okay with sort of nodding our heads to proceed. And
kind
then
of a
you have
review.
your formal vote at the actual rate hearing.
Fine.
Nod away.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, great.
Nice work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for providing us with bedtime reading for the next week or two.
Okay, good. You don't feel the need to have a red pencil with you, although
No
I
red
won't stop you
pencil.
if you're compelled.
Just a modified letter to the heavy users.
Okay, the next, we're only an hour behind now. The next discussion is the flagpole. Right, Ms. Brown?
So you had approved moving forward with a second flagpole for commemorative purposes on the town green, and suggested.
We're
looking into it.
Looking into it.
Looking into,
Yeah. So a suggested location is behind the fountain, behind the benches that are surrounding the fountain, out closer to Central Street. Corey, our custodian, came across a collapsible pole option that I thought would warrant some further review. I just need a little more details about how tall it actually is, what options there are. But that was one possibility, or obviously you can go with a standard pole that stays up at its regular height the whole time. We don't have a lot of requests for commemorative flags. That may grow over time. It's hard to predict. So that's because we don't have a lot of requests. The collapsible pole or telescoping pole was, I thought, an intriguing idea.
or you just leave it on the other pole.
This collapsible pole, when it collapses, what is its height from the
Well,
ground?
I was trying to find that on the spec sheet. I'm assuming it's like 3 or 4 feet
Yeah.
up.
I'm thinking, is it permanent?
You can do either, temporary
I'm just
or
concerned about a
permanent.
3-foot pole sticking up in the middle of the.
Sort of the height of a bollard.
Well, again, it's worth researching, I guess.
So I'd be interested in knowing how
Yeah,
high.
I was too.
it's
I
sticking up
didn't
from
see
the
that on the
ground.
spec sheet.
But it goes up 21 feet, or at least this is what.
I think you have different options. But,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And again, we don't want to be taller than the one that's there now.
Which is not very high.
Right.
I don't know what it is.
This is starting from a lower spot, so.
Right, this is a little lower
True.
down elevation.
Okay.
An interesting idea. I guess we need more information.
Yeah.
Sounds, okay?
Okay, we'll pull together.
Yeah.
Try to get the details and give you a couple of options.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of location,
Mm-hmm.
seems viable.
And this is again down by the fountain.
Next time you're out on the front, take a walk and see what you think.
All right.
Okay, next is special town meeting motions and assignments.
Is it possible to just pop up the food truck since?
Oh, sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Teresa Meldon, Masconomo Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I submitted a proposal to the select board about requesting permission to have a food truck on town property for town elections. So the next one would not be until March 5th, I believe. But I would suggest that having a food truck will bring more people to the polls. Most of our voters come between the hours of 4 and 7 p.m. on their way home from work, I'm assuming. So they could stop, vote, grab dinner, and go home. And it would save them time, because as you know, if you have children, once you're home, you don't go out. So this would save time, it would encourage, I believe, more people to vote. It could become an event, and it won't take up much space. Most of the trucks are, it's like 16 feet long, 7 feet wide, which is just smaller than a parking space, so it take up 2 spaces minimum, one for the truck, one for people to gather in front, perhaps 3 spaces ideally. It would sit there from 4 till 8 p.m. when the polls close. It would cost the town nothing, would not require any electricity or water because these trucks have generators. They go back to their sites and they clean up, charge their batteries, and load their water tanks. And I don't believe there would even be any trash because you can't bring the food into the polls, so you'd vote, you'd shop, and you'd split.
Hey, first of all, I love this, Therese. I think it's such a great idea. Very fun. And it said, I did read where you wrote that trash removal is responsibility of the truck. Does that mean they place bins outside the truck and then?
Some trucks do, but we could place a bin out there, but I don't think, in March especially, I don't think anyone's going to be
Carrying
noshing
it
out there. I think they're gonna take it home and, feed their family, like woohoo, takeout.
Absolutely.
And there are many, a lot of choices for food trucks that are just, in the area, Middleton, Peabody, Danvers, so we start with one, if this catches on and we get lots of people, maybe by October, we have 2 trucks.
Options.
And I think too, in order to make it, in order for folks to understand that this is even happening, I put it in the Cricket, I have flyers made, on my own to put in all the area businesses, at the churches, at the library, everywhere, so what's happening?
So the only other question was that the town clerk did bring up the proximity to the actual polling. And sometimes I know that you can't have political signs within a certain proximity. And she said she had some concerns about that. Greg, did you have any more information from her on that?
So I think, yeah, she was just concerned about congestion and the entranceway, but we're in a parking space
Yeah.
far enough away from that entrance.
Right.
And as you indicated, it would seem that people are going to do it after they vote, not before. I think those concerns might be able to be minimized.
And the only signage we would put up, if perhaps, is just, did you vote?
Right.
Remember to vote. This is completely not part, the whole goal is to get people.
Right.
Yeah, the only way they can buy a sandwich is.
Oh, is to come out with their sticker.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, it's not, it's a, did you vote?
Yeah.
So you're working.
Exactly.
I love the idea, I think it's great. Is the only condition, I would just make sure that there are no political signs on the
Yeah.
truck. Other than that, I think it's a great idea.
Do you need a motion?
Should we,
So you would need to grant a hawker's license
Okay.
to the actual vendor.
Okay.
We're proposing this.
so
So
shall we,
again, it sounds like there's a nodding of heads that this is a
Yeah.
positive thing to move forward with, but as we get closer to the actual election day, the actual truck vendors would want to apply for that license. And then you could approve those licenses,
so we don't need to take
not to
a vote
take
back.
official action now, except that you're giving a green
We're
light
just
that you
giving
can
you a thumbs
proceed.
up.
And,
So how far ahead of an election does
Yeah,
a harvest
it's like a month
license need
or
to be
what.
applied for?
a couple months would be more than enough time.
So maybe right after the first of the year,
Yes.
so after the holidays.
Okay, great. And
Yeah,
is there a
sometime.
cost for this, the license?
Well, there might be $25 or $50, something like that. I'd have to,
Yeah,
not
it's
recall.
probably not unusual for them anyway.
No,
Yeah,
no,
I'm sure
they
that
would
there's
expect that.
strategy to do that.
And is this done through clerk's office, through whose office?
Through the select board's office. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in January, I would come back.
Yes.
Or you can email Debbie, who is the administrative assistant, and just say, ask her
Yeah.
about moving
Vendor-
forward.
Vendor's license for that, yep.
Okay. It is, so then each election, a new vendor's license needs to be applied for.
Mhm.
Yep.
Oh, the vendor's license is per event, it's not per period of time.
Well, there's two types.
This would be
So-
for.
We have a one-day.
There's a,
right,
basically, there's a
thing.
one event, yeah, one day event type license, or you can get a seasonal license. The seasonal is gonna be more expensive.
Yeah.
Maybe,
And it may be a different truck, say.
Right.
That's a school, and so I don't think we polling place, so yeah.
Thank you very, very much.
Excellent.
Yeah, I
Thanks,
really
Therese.
appreciate it. Hey, you're welcome.
Say hi to Kurt.
I certainly will.
Good idea.
Good
Good
evening,
idea.
thank you, very good, thank you.
thanks for your patience.
Her husband was on the planning board for a long time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we are. I lost my place.
Town meeting assignments.
Town meeting assignments. And for Article 1, that will be moved by somebody
From the school.
from the school.
Yeah, school committee would
The
typically
two,
handle
the
that.
two, Anna Lynn Mitchell for motion 1 and Anna Lynn Mitchell for, okay, fine,
So there are two
yes.
sub-motions under
Mhm.
Article 1, but yes.
Right. Article 2 is the $400,000 from the savings to the fields. Does anyone particularly want to take up that one? Okay.
You've done such a good
I'll
job.
That's the
trying to-
liaison to the school committee, so.
Yep.
there you go.
And you've discussed it twice, by the third time it'd be a
You're in
challenge.
the middle of it.
Right, okay. Who would second?
I'll second.
Okay. Article 3, which is the zoning, and that will be someone from the planning board.
Typically it's the chair and
Yes,
the vice
okay,
chair.
fine. So similarly, Article 4 and Article 5. And the ladder truck.
So this one, the motion needs to be slightly
Yeah.
amended from what the article, how the article reads in the warrant.
Mhm.
So right now, it's saying that the 180,000 from the proceeds would be directly used. It's a little more indirect, so the state DOR, Department of Revenue, wants to see the proceeds flow into fund balance, and then you're actually taking the 180 out of fund balance.
So is there a motion to actually amend the article?
So the motion would just state that, be slightly different from the wording in the article.
On the floor though, right?
Yes, yes, but we can give that wording to Alan ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one change, and then the second change is the
Ambulance.
The ambulance is 450,000 to rescind, not 400.
Do these so-called quote amendments need a vote, or is it just a clarification?
So it can be part of the motion that's made,
Okay,
even though it differs slightly from the
all right, so what's printed and
from the
what's made
article, but it's
are different, but,
it's within the scope.
okay.
And Alan would now confirm with him that he is okay with it as a main motion rather than
And that
having
formal
a two-step process,
Yeah.
right?
That's correct.
Right.
Done?
All right, I will take that.
You're doing Article 6 or the motion to the amendment?
It's not exactly an amendment. The motion doesn't match the article, but it is within the four corners. So we make a motion that's correct, and the motion
That's
that will be shown on the screen will be correct.
And unless Alan objects, that'll be the end of it. We won't have to take a separate vote.
But just in your explanation, you can explain the slight variation of a thing
Okay.
here.
Do you want me to second that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
And the final, which is the salary reserve account. Kathy? Sure.
I'll second.
Great. Great. And now we are at the police chief and fire chief contracts.
Yeah, so one at a time. So for police chief, so it's a second 3-year contract for Todd. And it is very, very similar to the existing contract, however, it is for the 3 years. And consistent with what was anticipated in his previous contract, and consistent with the police union contract, is we have moved to full funding of what's called the Quinn bill. It's an education incentive. So there's state law, which is called the Quinn bill. Education incentive provides for 10, 20, or 25% incentives depending on your level of education, associates, bachelor's, and a master's. So we have ramped that up, and so he would be eligible for the 20% of bachelor's incentive. It's his bachelor's.
Oh.
Yeah, I did confirm that. I actually made that mistake in writing the first draft. So yes. So then it still calls for the same quarterly reviews, which the chief would like to continue. He has found those valuable and helpful. I think you have as well. And provides for a 1% and a 2%, and then in year 3 it leaves it open depending on the across-the-board department head raises for the COLA. So it does leave that 3rd year undefined, pending what the average would be, the majority of department heads would be getting in that year 3. Other than that, it mirrors the existing contract.
Becky?
I'm just curious, is there, we're forgoing the full 3 years?
Yes, I mean, there is a clause for early termination if necessary. All of our contracts have that provision. You know,
But Todd wanted to, that's his preference?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he does anticipate retiring after the 3 years.
I move to approve the police chief's contract.
Second.
Slow
Beat me
draw
to
there.
it.
Is there discussion?
Becky probably wants to talk about it.
Meeting ready for a vote. Brian?
Yes.
Becky?
Absolutely.
Kathy?
Yes.
And I say yes.
Yes.
So, fire chief's contract?
So fire chief contract, again, similarly, it's based off of the existing contract that we had with Chief Cleary. It does provide for the first year as a salary, which was very similar to what was budgeted for this coming year. And then it does provide those 2 increases that are the other unions and assumed to be for the department heads as well. So that 3% in year 2 and year 3. Provides for performance reviews with you as a board and me. And again, similar provisions, provides for, as the old contracts have in the past, for continuing professional development, so long as there's sufficient funds, appropriations for those. It allows for outside employment as long as that employment doesn't interfere with the normal duties of the chief. And again, subject to review. Provides for the use of the chief vehicle can be used for incidental local use because at any time a call can come in. So if he's doing an errand in the town car, that's okay because he could be getting a call and he would dash into that emergency if needed.
But if he goes on vacation, he.
Correct. So it
Not
does.
taking it down east.
Right, so it specifically says incidental use within the county is fine, or if there's a work-related trip outside of the county, that is also okay, but it has to be work-related.
Would you like a motion to approve?
I was going to ask if there was any discussion, but any further discussion, but I will take a motion.
So moved.
You
were just.
Somebody getting punchy.
Second.
I already seconded.
She seconded.
Gosh. That's all right.
Nice to have a competitor. Further discussion? Ready for the vote? Brian?
Yes.
Okay. Becky?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
I vote yes.
John votes yes.
So thank you, I think our public safety departments are in strong shape. I'm pleased that we have,
Yeah, really good.
I think we have two very strong chiefs.
Yeah.
Ready to serve,
Absolutely.
continue to serve and ready to serve, so I'm pleased that it has gone as smoothly as it has, quite frankly. It's a relief.
Didn't look that way a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think we made some good progress.
So we can say welcome Chief McNeely and yay again Chief Fitzgerald.
Yes, yep, praise to both and looking forward to continuing building the relationships, so thank you for that.
We did some liaison reports. Are there anyone else want to talk about other committees? That is all for now.
Not to talk about, but just to clarify where we left off the discussion on the liaison assignments. Did we complete everything and, or do we need to kind of finalize some of those?
I think we need to
rotations?
finalize.
I think we haven't, so
Yes,
could we
yeah.
just take an action to put it on the next meeting to kind of?
I think it would be easier after the governance
Yes,
meeting.
agreed,
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I think that was the thought,
Right,
to
okay.
follow it up after that session.
I just didn't see it on the list, so,
Yep, no, it should be on the list.
thank you.
Okay. Is there any?
Covered it all.
I think we've covered it all.
We got back on track real quick, man. Congratulations.
I need to figure out a way of dealing with presentations, and maybe we ought to talk at some point about setting expectations for people who are presenting, because we had 20 minutes scheduled for something that took.
Yeah.
Right, and I understand that's important, but.
But we often underestimate those timeframes.
Oh, well, it's not just that you underestimate, but they over-consume.
Yes.
Right.
And I think perhaps when Debbie is setting things up,
Do guidelines.
she should,
Mhm.
Yeah, we do.
Well, and also
Three to
talk
5 minutes
about,
per chart, so if they have more than,
Everything
You know,
got,
5
everything
charts.
charts with you.
they're not,
Yeah.
no, I'm just saying time frame. That's benchmark. 3 to 5 minutes per chart, and if they got more charts than that, it's gonna take
You know,
longer.
I think.
'Cause that allows for discussion and.
What probably helps, Ann, is prefacing when somebody's gonna put up a slideshow, tell them, here's the deal.
I'm glad to do that.
In advance, and just say,
But-
you've got about X minutes.
It would be nice if they didn't come in with a 2-hour presentation.
Correct.
And find out that they had 10 minutes to do it.
Right.
So,
but they're told that in advance when you're at you, and if we tell them again here,
But I think Debbie can also play a role in being a little bit of a gatekeeper.
Yep.
So if there's
Yep.
10 minutes assigned, they can't come in here with 20 charts. They get 3 charts, that's it.
But
so she could get back, she could get back to them and say,
Right.
there's a lot of stuff.
It's a little too much for the time allotted. Do you need more time? We'll have to push you out, or, but I think that would be a really
Okay, that's
helpful
fair.
option for her.
But
to help us with.
in addition, I think there's also a misunderstanding on the part of people who attend the meetings and how the dialogue is supposed to go and the reason the dialogue is supposed to go through the chair. It's to be able to keep things.
I need to be
But
more
also-
firm about saying no.
Well, but people also they just don't understand that, in terms of how the meetings run, that
There are
It's-
schedules.
well, there are schedules, but it's also how they're supposed to operate. That's part of.
We don't have two people talking to each other and leaving,
We had that one gentleman asking questions directly to the vendor.
and that's my fault, and I won't let it happen again.
Do you need a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Meeting ready for a vote. Brian?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Anne says yes.
John says yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
all.
Thank
Oh,
you,
lots
Ann.
done.
Oh,